In a reality that refuses to understand and often breeds denial, the Demon King refused but to ignore the truth standing before him, where he stood stunned by the inability of his black flames, which he had long boasted of, to scratch the heroes, wondering bitterly how the hero's blade managed to pierce his hard scales and settle in the depths of his heart. He could not comprehend what was happening, for he saw himself as superior to everyone, he who entered the Demon King Academy at the top and graduated as the exemplary student, and had dedicated himself to studying the Demon King standard, that foundational theory established by the first emperor, with a depth and sincerity surpassing anyone else. He applied the rules to the letter, building the tower and kidnapping princesses as the standard requires, then nurturing the heroes who came to save them, believing that their anger and sorrow were the ultimate feast for a demon king, and that killing them early was a waste. The standards taught him to fatten them up before devouring them, for the stronger the hero, the more delicious the meal, and he followed this approach with absolute devotion, believing that world domination was only a matter of time. And after absorbing the emotions of anger and sorrow from countless beings, he became a demon king unmatched in power. Thus, lying in the dirt covered in blood, he screamed, questioning the reason for his end in this humiliating manner, his eyes filled with confusion and shock at this illogical defeat. The hero looked at him with disgust, describing him and the rest of the demons as identical trash, explaining sarcastically that demons set up this situation for themselves yet always seem shocked by the result, a matter for which he finds no explanation. And when the Demon King denounced his speech, the hero revealed to him that their kidnapping of the famous princess was merely a recognized signal to start the Demon King's activity and an invitation to stop him. The hero mocked the stupidity of the idea of killing the human king, explaining that doing so would plunge the kingdom into chaos. For if the king were kidnapped, those greedy for the throne would start a civil war, and thus human wrath would not be directed towards the Demon King, meaning he would not evolve or increase in strength, which contradicts the teachings of the standard he sanctifies. The hero added, mocking and grateful at the same time, that if the heroes do not go to the demons in the tower, the demons send monsters to the villages, which helps the heroes train seriously. But it becomes much better upon reaching the tower, for the first floor is always stacked with the weak, making it an ideal place for leveling up and refining current skills. The Demon King remembered with regret how he was careful not to kill the heroes halfway to harvest more energy, believing this was what the standard dictated to him. The hero pulled his sword from the Demon King's body, and the Demon King screamed from the intensity of the pain. And here the hero confronted him with the harsh truth. When the tower becomes old and boring, they simply kill the Demon King. So a new king appears with a new tower, for the entire place is nothing but a hunting ground designed specifically for heroes. The laughter of the other heroes rose as they mocked him, thanking him for helping them raise their levels, describing him sarcastically not just as a Demon King, but as the Godfather who nurtured them. The heroes stood over the body of their exhausted opponent, expressing rudely their satisfaction with the abundant loot, and thanking him sarcastically for providing the best place to increase their levels and train hard. The Demon King repeated the word, Godfather, in daze, disbelieving the shock he received that his great tower was to them nothing but a training ground for collecting points. And despite the hero's admission of his opponent's toughness and that many heroes had met their demise, he belittled those sacrifices, considering with indifference that they only contributed to increasing his personal fame, while the hero was bidding him farewell dismissively in preparation to kill him. The Demon King's anger ignited from the mockery and insult he was subjected to, wondering with a burning sensation about the futility of the Demon King standard if this was the end. He refused to surrender to death in vain in this humiliating way, so he screamed with all his might, declaring himself. The Demon King, while immense energy began to gather around him, but before he could do anything, the hero cut off his head, and in the last moments of his life, he saw the other heroes laughing and mocking him, threatening them through his sharp gaze that they would pay dearly for insulting him, and swore a definitive vow of that revenge. But the hero stood beside him, warning his comrades against damaging the head due to his greedy desire to seize the horns. The hero suddenly noticed strange sparks emitting from the body lying before him, as the Demon King decided in those moments to sacrifice the last drop of his life to achieve his goal. The hero realized too late that something dangerous was about to happen. The hero screamed, ordering his comrades to flee immediately. A terrifying energy exploded from the Demon King's body, causing a massive boom, and everything vanished amidst a huge explosion and the panicked screams of the heroes. In the final moments of the Demon King, he realized bitterly that the standard was completely wrong and that the heroes used it to mock them. He wished to get one more chance to ignore that standard, and even feed it to the goblins in revenge for what happened. A voice calling the name Piers Dias pierced the stillness of the darkness, causing him to wake up and open his eyes suddenly. He looked around in extreme confusion, trying to comprehend what was happening, and wondering in amazement if he was still alive. Voices rose urging him to advance quickly to the podium, to realize that the name being called belonged to him. Piers Diaz was in shock at what was happening, while another person urged him to ascend the podium. The academy principal interrupted him, scolding him for his distraction on his graduation day while being the genius student. And when his eyes fell upon the red badge, the symbol of completing the Demon King Academy, he realized he had returned in time 15 years into the past, specifically to the graduation ceremony. As the graduates were asked to ascend the podium, he realized, despite his ignorance of the reason for his return, that this was his golden opportunity. One of the professors asked him to prepare as the top student, Piers Diaz, to take the oath on behalf of the new Demon Kings. The glowing laws stood before Piers Diaz, reminding him of the Demon King standard, which mandates building a tower within the domain, kidnapping a prince or princess, playing the mastermind role by causing chaos and leaving clues, nurturing heroes to harvest energy from them, and finally filling the lower floors with weak monsters to increase difficulty gradually. He looked at them with disgust, for those standards he had previously memorized by heart until he was nauseated by them, and devoted his entire life to adhering to their principles with extreme precision, were in his eyes now nothing but the garbage that led him to his doom and turned him into a mere puppet manipulated by heroes. While standing amidst the graduation ceremony, he asked himself about the point of swearing before everyone to follow these rules for the rest of his life, while knowing their catastrophic result. He felt an overwhelming rage at the mere thought that they would ask him to follow those laws again. His silence did not last long, as the official called him, asking him to step forward to recite the great standard as the top of his class. But Piers interrupted expectations with his shocking and curt reply when he announced his total refusal. A state of confusion and amazement prevailed among his fellow graduates who did not comprehend what was happening. He did not stop at refusing, but screamed, declaring that he could not swear to such a ridiculous oath, describing following the standard as the most stupid and degenerate act one could do. And he confirmed loudly before everyone that those laws are nothing but trash, which increased the intensity of the situation. Shock and horror dominated the faces of the demons and students present at this unprecedented audacity. That was the defining moment when the greatest academic achiever turned into what they described as the madman of the century. Archduke Arcane Blairymph slammed his hand down in anger, threatening him with immediate execution on the spot for his audacity to insult the sacred Demon King standards. But he reconsidered, trying to contain the situation, so he decided to grant him a last chance given his past exemplary behavior and undeniable immense talent. He gave him the choice between withdrawing his reckless words and apologizing to the general demon world, or facing the punishment of assignment to the Overrun region. The hall buzzed with anxious whispers about Overrun, that dimension which is considered a graveyard for demon kings, and a sentence of certain death where they die there by the dozens. Some wondered angrily why a criminal like him was granted another chance instead of killing him, considering that an apology was not sufficient. The Archduke warned him in a stern tone that Overrun is the worst region where countless demon kings lost their lives. But Piers interrupted him coldly and defiantly, asking to be sent there immediately. He announced his determination to go to prove that the Demon King standards they sanctify are just nonsense, which struck the Archduke with complete astonishment. The Archduke lost his patience and screamed, scolding Piers, describing him as hopeless, and issued an immediate order to transfer him to Overrun as his deployment zone. He decided to strip him of any privileges usually granted to top demon kings, and deprived him of any demons accompanying him. The gate opened to swallow him with a strict order banning him from returning to the demon world until the conquest was complete. While falling through the portal, he accepted his fate, considering it an expected result of the chaos he caused. He realized in those moments that Overrun is the place where the heroes who killed him in his previous life reside. He remembered that even before turning back time, he had chosen Overrun himself in his first life out of arrogance and the belief that the strongest must conquer the greatest difficulty. He admitted to himself that arrogance was what cost him his life previously, because the abundance of heroes there exploited his blind adherence to the standards. Finally, he landed safely, spreading his wings amidst the snows of the Regressed mountains in the northern continent, ready to start his new journey. Piers resolved this time not to allow a repetition of what happened previously, deciding that he would be the one to exploit the heroes' standards for his benefit instead of being their victim. Events returned to before the start of the graduation ceremony. Gordon Derrick was preparing with extreme care, grooming his appearance as the first and best graduate of the Demon Academy. According to the regulations of the demon world, the Academy trains demons to serve kings, such that the top demon is assigned to serve the top demon king. This privilege sparked the envy and jealousy of other graduates who came in second and third, wishing they had exerted more effort to gain the honor of serving Lord Piers. Gordon saw that all demon kings were great, but he firmly believed that no one matched Lord Piers in greatness. He viewed him as a miracle appearing once in a millennium, a descendant of demonic dragons whose mention history would immortalize, considering graduating in the same year with him a massive blessing. His imagination ran wild, envisioning that together they would be able to conquer any dimension, imagining a huge statue bringing them together as a great king and his loyal assistant. He resolved with intense enthusiasm to carve his own name as well into the glorious pages of the demon world's history. But those rosy dreams collided with a shocking reality when he remembered the moment Piers screamed describing the standards as garbage. Gordon was struck by an overwhelming shock that shattered his perspective, disbelieving that his idol despised the sacred standards. His mental image was completely destroyed amidst extreme amazement and horror at his king's words. The scene shifted to the deep region of the Regressed mountains in the northern continent, where Gordon arrived carrying heavy bags amidst the snow. Signs of confusion and despair appeared on him as he wondered why all this happened. Piers was surprised to see him there, for he had been told previously that no demon would accompany him, yet one was sent in the end. When he looked closely, he recognized him and welcomed him. Gordon initiated by asking him while breaking down about the reason for doing that reckless act, but Piers pretended not to understand, asking what he meant. Gordon exploded in anger, reminding him of his insult to the standards before everyone, and that this caused their exile to the deadly Overrun region, certain that he would die because of him. Piers tried to calm him down, mocking that he would tear his hair out from extreme worry, to which Gordon replied screaming that his hair was not the problem now. In those moments, Piers compared his assistant's current state to what he was before turning back time, where he was characterized by confidence and calmness. He remembered when Gordon used to encourage him, confirming that together they could overcome difficulties, and even claimed he wouldn't have felt enthusiastic had the mission not been in Overrun. Piers realized that the state of panic affecting Gordon was justified given the difference in circumstances, and decided not to tell him the truth of his time travel so he wouldn't think him crazy. After catching his breath with difficulty, Gordon apologized for his previous breakdown and decided to commit to his duty given the reality. He soon returned to clinging to the standards, reminding that the first rule requires building a tower, but emphasized that it shouldn't be hidden or in a very harsh environment so heroes could find it. He pointed out with concern that their current location is surrounded by towering mountains and powerful monsters, making it dangerous and impossible for humans to reach, suggesting moving to another place. Piers rejected the proposal firmly, announcing his decision to build the tower in this specific place. He took out the tower seed and planted it in the frozen ground, explaining that it needed Demon King's blood to grow. Gordon was stricken with panic again, accusing him of violating the standards and throwing the Demon King's pride to the wind, to which Piers answered coldly that he never swore to follow those laws. Deep inside, Piers understood his assistant's disgust, realizing the difficulty for a demon to deny a doctrine carved deep into his bones. Piers justified to himself the difficulty of rejecting the standards, considering that unless one experiences death or something equally drastic, one cannot deny them because they are part of their composition as demons. He cut his hand sharply, directing his speech to Gordon to listen well, emphasizing that the Demon King standards are just garbage, specifically mentioning their current region, Overrun. His blood flowed onto the tower seed to activate it, and the seed responded immediately, releasing a red beam of light and creating a magic circle in front of them. Piers explained that the reason lies in Overrun being overcrowded with heroes beyond description. While the tower was performing the identification process with its user, Piers Dias of the Black Flame Demonic Dragon Clan, and the tower began actually appearing. Piers revealed to his follower the bitter truth that humans, after destroying countless towers, realized how they work and used the Demon King standards as a weapon against them, which explains the constant death of kings in this region. Before Gordon's amazement, Piers mocked, saying they should be named Hero Standards, because they no longer serve demons. The summoning of the towering tower amidst the snow was completed, and the two stood before it contemplating its hugeness. Piers invited his assistant to enter, only to find the first floor completely empty. Gordon noticed with regret that a normal tower should contain complex structures and monsters, but this tower is empty and without any features, as if designed for a demon king stripped of privileges. The situation continued up to the 5th floor where the king's room was, which was also empty. Gordon accepted the reality regarding the tower that was already built, but insisted on the necessity of following at least the second rule of the standards. He reminded Piers of that rule which mandates kidnapping a prince or princess, preferring to be close to the throne to ensure obtaining greater demonic energy. He asked permission to offer advice, so the king agreed. Then he displayed a map pointing out that the kingdom of Corzin is closest to the Regressed mountains. He suggested with enthusiasm kidnapping the princess with the highest rank in succession to absorb the kingdom's anger and sorrow and grow quickly. Piers interrupted him, agreeing to the kidnapping idea despite anticipating Gordon's doubts, but he indicated the presence of a specific princess he had his eyes on. Gordon got excited and offered help in the mission, but Piers ordered him to stay to guard the tower under the pretext that the king's residence shouldn't remain empty. Gordon breathed a sigh of relief, believing his master had returned to his senses, and that his previous actions were just stress resulting from graduation, giving hope to fix the situation. And when the assistant asked about the target's identity, Piers shocked him by choosing the kingdom of Hilderin, the nation located in the far south and the farthest possible point from the tower. Piers flew towards a distant castle window, identifying his target as the 13th princess, the one with the least presence and weakest influence among all. He stormed her room announcing his arrival to take her, which made Gordon scream on the other end that this choice is the exact opposite of the standards. Meanwhile, the princess looked at him in amazement, wondering about his identity. Piers stormed the princess's room, announcing coldly that he is the Demon King and came to kidnap her, but she received him with a faint laugh that seemed strange in such a situation. Instead of fear, she asked him boldly and defiantly if he was confident in his ability to handle her, which aroused his astonishment. Piers considered her question strange, wondering to himself if she thought demon kings were a joke, and answered her with absolute confidence that he could, of course, as a demon king. Here the princess surprised him with her immediate surrender, saying she would allow him to take her, which struck him with shock and amazement. Piers doubted her suspicious calmness and asked her about the scheme she was plotting, to which she replied that she had always expected this to happen someday being a princess. He warned her against trying to deceive him, confirming he would not be lenient and would not allow her to trap him because he is in a desperate situation as well. The princess denied the existence of any conspiracy, asking logically how she could set a trap when she didn't know of his coming today. Piers acknowledged to himself the validity of her logic, but could not shake off a strange feeling of unease. The princess cut his train of thought by inviting him to leave, extending her hand towards him. He carried her and flew back to his tower in the Regressed mountains. Upon his arrival, Gordon received him with eagerness and tension. Piers ordered the princess to be put in a corner on the 4th floor instead of the prison, justifying that by her lack of resistance and his willingness to grant her some leniency. Gordon agreed, then asked to speak about an important matter. The scene shifted to the 4th floor where the princess was left alone. She sat on the cold, hard floor, whispering to herself that she was truly kidnapped. She began contemplating the empty room, noting the absence of pillows, blankets, and servants, and the place's lack of beautiful gardens and all the aspects of luxury she was used to in the kingdom. Despite all this deprivation, she mumbled with a mysterious smile that the situation wasn't too bad. In the meantime, Gordon showed his master an invitation that arrived from the Tower of Monsters. He explained it was a welcoming party for the new Demon King, but Piers mocked the idea, considering it a pathetic attempt to harass him and flex power over him. He added that the pride of Demon Kings usually prevents them from cooperating, but the harsh and unprecedented conditions of Aaron forced them to abandon that pride and work together. Piers decided to accept the invitation, admitting that he ignored them previously thinking they were weak, but he sees now the necessity of communicating with them. Piers arrived at the towering Tower of Monsters amidst the forest. There, he was received by Draxon, the Demon King of Monsters who has ruled the place for 70 years, sitting on his throne devouring meat fiercely. Draxon asked him dismissively if he was the new king who mocked traditions, describing him as unimpressive. Piers replied coldly, asking if he wanted a fight, asking him to state the reason for the invitation. Draxon laughed sarcastically and revealed that Archduke Arcane was the one who tasked him with watching him. Piers replied with a direct insult to the Archduke, describing him as an annoying old vampire, and mocking that his exile to Aaron wasn't enough to make him happy. Draxon flew into a rage at this audacity in addressing the Archduke, and in a sudden provocative move, he threw a piece of meat towards Piers, ordering him to lick it. Draxon threatened to pardon his rudeness if he licked the piece of meat, but Piers ignored his threat with a rhetorical question, asking if Draxon really didn't know the reason for his presence here. Draxon explained arrogantly that he knew the reason, which is Piers' mockery of the sacred Demon King traditions. Piers interrupted him and reminded him that those traditions forbid them from killing each other. Then he stomped the ground with his foot, causing it to crack from the force of the impact. Draxon was shocked by his strength. Piers wondered sarcastically if he really believed he would adhere to that rule. Draxon felt a terrifying aura emitting from his opponent, making him realize too late his misjudgment of the situation. He tried stammering by mentioning Archduke Arcane and his orders to ensure the kidnapping of a princess, threatening Piers with losing his authority if he didn't submit a report within a month. Piers interrupted him coldly, telling him he expected this talk, and revealed to him that he had actually kidnapped a princess. He added in a tone carrying an implied meaning that she fits his taste perfectly, which aroused Draxon's confusion. Piers left the Tower of Monsters, leaving Draxon behind. Then he returned to his tower in the Regressed mountains. Gordon praised his master for showing the greatness of the Demon King, but Piers downplayed what happened, confirming that it wasn't special and that his opponent wouldn't dare do more currently. Despite that, he stressed the necessity of preparation and ordered Gordon to check the princess's condition to learn how to exploit her. In his heart, Piers felt worried about the stance of other Demon Kings, realizing that their union against him would pose a major obstacle. He admitted that the consequences of mocking traditions were greater than he expected, but he insisted that if time went back, he would choose the same path again, preferring death over bowing to that garbage. He resolved not to repeat the mistakes of the past and to build his foundation from scratch this time. Although he expected to get few energy points from kidnapping a low-ranking princess, he considered it the safer option, but he was suddenly shocked when he checked his points and found them exceeding 13,000 points, which aroused his extreme astonishment. His thinking was interrupted by the arrival of a video message from the Tower of Monsters, making him wonder about its content. Draxon appeared in the video congratulating Piers as a new Demon King, expressing his desire to offer a gift as a gesture of goodwill despite their bad first meeting. Draxon admitted that Piers' achievements in Aaron are not easy, showing admiration and wondering if his mockery of traditions was just a cover for something greater. Piers felt that something was not right. Suddenly, Gordon stormed the room terrified, screaming that there was a serious problem on the 4th floor. Piers rushed there to find an unbelievable scene. The floor that was empty and cold had turned into a lush garden full of flowers and butterflies. The state of the tower showed that the process of naturalization was underway on the 4th floor. Amidst this magical garden, the princess stood surrounded by elemental spirits, making Piers realize that she created a complete ecosystem inside a magical tower. He realized that this achievement could only be done by someone who mastered the 4 elements, and remembered that there is only one spirit elementalist in the continent capable of that. He confronted her with the fact that she is not the 13th princess, as he thought, to which she answered with a smile that she expected he mistook her for Elena. Piers asked her in amazement about her true identity. She revealed her name Ernan Hilderin, declaring proudly that she is the first princess of the kingdom of Hilderin. And in the kingdom, the shocking news spread that the first princess had been kidnapped by the Demon King. In the kingdom of Hilderin, the king flew into a rage, screaming, threatening whoever dared to kidnap his dear princess Ernan, and ordered immediately gathering the strongest heroes and the entire army to retrieve her and cut off the head of the foolish Demon King. Amidst this chaos, the princess returned to remind Piers of her previous question about whether he could handle her, confirming that this was the reason behind that question of hers. Piers explained that he was not deceived by her appearance, for he had heard of the existence of a genius elemental witch full of mana, and it was impossible not to detect her, wondering curiously how she hid that immense energy from him. The princess revealed a ring on her hand, explaining that it is a royal heirloom that can conceal mana. The princess asked Piers if he intended to return her after discovering her true identity, but he rejected the idea completely, considering that returning the princess would make him a laughingstock and no kingdom would fear him, which would make it difficult for him to collect demonic energy. He decided to hold on to her whatever the cost. Suddenly, the system detected immense anger directed towards him, leading to a crazy rise in his demonic energy points to exceed 19,000 points. Piers realized that the kingdom had identified him as the kidnapper, and that the situation wouldn't change whether she was the 1st or 13th princess. Piers confirmed to the princess that she was still a hostage of his. In the kingdom, the king issued decisive orders to kill the Demon King and retrieve the princess. But the advisors faced a dilemma as they did not yet know the identity of the responsible Demon King, so they sent reconnaissance patrols and asked the king to wait. The king exploded in anger in their faces, scolding them for doing nothing while his daughter was kidnapped, and ordered them to hurry in finding out the perpetrator. One of the advisors reminded the king of the recent kidnapping incident of a neighboring country's prince by the Demon King of Lust, and how that brought everyone's wrath upon him and led to his killing by the heroes. He wondered in confusion about the reason for the appearance of another Demon King daring to kidnap his princess, despite that living example, considering the matter extremely strange. The rest of the advisors realized that something was indeed strange. The king deduced that the news indicated a new Demon King. Suddenly a soldier arrived to inform them of important information, where traces of teleportation magic were detected heading north towards the Regressed Mountains. The king and his advisors were shocked by the destination, for the Regressed Mountains are located in the far north, while their kingdom is in the far south. In the Demon King's tower, Gordon expresses his worry about the arrival of the Hilderin Kingdom's army. But Piers was smiling with confidence, certain that the kingdom of Hilderin would not be able to reach him, given the danger of the road and the presence of many countries between them and the mountains. He had calculated the vast distance and the geographical and political obstacles preventing the passage of an army through other countries. Piers added that the intermediate countries would not open their borders to a foreign army, leaving them with only one option: hiring a heroes' guild. The king bowed to reality and ordered contact with the heroes' guild. But at the guild headquarters, panic and hesitation prevailed as soon as they heard the destination was the Regressed Mountains. The heroes refused to risk their lives in a place teeming with hellish monsters, considering that the king of Overrun would be sending them to certain death. Piers predicted this scenario accurately, knowing that heroes driven by money would not risk going to a place that dangerous, and for this reason, he chose to build his base there. His tight planning and deep knowledge of Aaron impressed Gordon, who felt as if his master had lived in this place before, despite his apparent violation of the rules. In the kingdom, the king screamed in extreme amazement and anger at no hero stepping forward to take the mission, wondering how they dare call themselves heroes while failing to save the princess. The advisor tried to calm him down, explaining that heroes in the Aaron region are different from others, for they care about material profits more than anything else, making them extremely selective in their missions. Meanwhile, inside the tower, Piers was examining the system store, which offered him to purchase soldiers like skeletons at a cost of 10,000 points, or weaken dimensional interference, realizing that forming a suitable army would take a long time and huge resources. He sat on his throne thinking seriously, as he realized that his current demonic energy was absolutely insufficient to face a whole army of heroes. He remembered the old fear he knew well from his previous life. To overcome this obstacle, he issued an order to Gordon to contact Draxon immediately, announcing his intention to sell demonic energy for human money. Gordon was struck by overwhelming shock, screaming in amazement and disbelief at the idea. He tried to object, explaining that demonic energy is the currency of dreams that allows them to transcend the limits of their race, open tower features, and summon monsters. So how could he exchange it for cheap human money? Piers justified his decision that he was confident Draxon would pay a huge sum, and that without this money he wouldn't be able to stop the heroes with his current energy. And he confirmed there was one thing he could do using human money, directing his gaze towards the fortress city Holton Work, near the mountains. Piers arrived disguised in a mercenary outfit at the city gate, where the guards stopped him sternly, denouncing the madness of a mercenary coming to the Regressed Mountains alone and being suspicious of him. Instead of arguing, he threw a gold piece at them which made them freeze in place. He winked at them, indicating splitting the amount between them, which made them open the way for him immediately. He entered the city and resolved to look for a guide due to his lack of knowledge of the place's details. The scene shifted to the headquarters of the Crimson Falcon Mercenary Guild, where members were drinking relaxedly, and one of them suggested leaving soon, but the leader rejected the idea, considering the place ideal. The leader explained their philosophy based on letting soldiers fight monsters while they content themselves with collecting battle spoils, wondering what could be better than that. The conversation touched upon the rumors of the new Demon King in the mountains, where one of them mocked it, describing it as fake news because Demon Kings usually build their towers in places easy for heroes to reach. They continued mocking the news of the kidnapping of the Overrun princess, ruling out the idea that a Demon King would cross the entire continent to kidnap a princess. One of them pointed out that the Heroes Guild refused the mission as soon as they heard the destination. They concluded in the end that the whole matter was just a play and a trick to extort more money. The leader agreed with their opinion, acknowledging the madness of these people when it comes to money. Suddenly, Piers appeared behind the leader, realizing then the reason for their behavior. The mercenaries jumped up terrified by his sudden appearance among them, wondering about his identity. Piers smiled sarcastically, noting that they seem widely knowledgeable about matters, making them ideal guides for him, and ordered that only one remain while the rest leave. The mercenaries attacked him, considering him an intruder and vowing he wouldn't leave alive. A violent fight broke out, but Piers countered them with extreme skill, dealing crushing blows. One of them tried to ambush him from behind, but Piers blocked the attack with amazing speed. The enemy was shocked when Piers caught his hammer with that ease. In the end, he found himself surrounded by mercenaries aiming their crossbows at him. Piers continues fighting, and throws the huge enemy towards the other mercenaries. The mercenary leader becomes frightened and describes Piers as a monster after he finished off his colleagues with complete ease. Outside the mercenary building, one of them asked in despair why they continue fighting, and another wondered why they didn't feel tired from so much fighting. After Piers finished off the rest of the mercenaries, he approached their leader. He approached him slowly, and with eyes shining in the dark, assured him he would keep him alive if he answered his questions. The mercenary leader lying beneath him trembled with fear and hastened to agree, begging for mercy. Piers asked them about the location of the slave market. The leader led him to a luxurious palace with a huge iron gate. Piers saw that the market sells only human slaves. The leader asked him hesitantly if that didn't please him, for Piers to ask him if there was something rarer, and throws a bag of gold coins towards him. The leader's attitude changes immediately, and he leads him to another section of the market. On the way, Piers wondered to himself how the leader could remain calm after seeing what happened to his mercenary followers, concluding bitterly that humans and demons are no different. The former craves money, and the latter craves energy. They arrived at underground dungeons, where the leader pointed to the way, Piers remembered when Gordon asked him what he intended to do with human money, so Piers answered him that he would buy slaves. He defined his goal precisely, that other races captured by humans. He explained he was looking specifically for an elf known for his integrity, to use him as a spy planting chaos among the ranks of heroes. Meanwhile, the hero Helan Cargill arrived to the kingdom, where the king received him warmly, expressing his confidence in the hero accepting the mission. Hylan confirmed his acceptance, pledging to save the princess, and bring the Demon King's head in the name of justice. Back at the slave market, the merchant asked Piers what kind of slaves he wanted, so Piers pointed to a detained elf and said he would buy him, indicating that the mercenary would pay the price. The mercenary was shocked and objected, but Piers shot him a terrifying look that made him retreat immediately and agree, stammering. Piers asked his companions to leave the room because he wanted to check something, but the merchant warned him that the elf might go wild. But Piers assured him he would pay the price if any harm occurred. Piers looked at the chained elf, noticing how humans turned this noble creature into a miserable slave. The elf felt Piers' demonic energy and asked him in astonishment why a demon was interested in an elf. Piers offered him a chance for revenge against humans. The elf admitted the offer was tempting, but he couldn't trust demons just as he doesn't trust humans. Piers assured him he was different and offered him a deal: loyalty for 50 years in exchange for safety and freedom, and reminded him that 50 years is not a long time for his race, and that this offer is much better than the humiliation he lives in. But the elf refused the offer, reminding Piers that demons seek to destroy the world tree served by elves, and consequently destroy the world it maintains. He asked sharply how he could trust him. Piers realized deep down that the elf had hit the nail on the head, and that asking for help from an elf is strange in the first place. Piers sworn on the Demon King standards that he would keep his promise and would not harm the world tree, an oath that equals in sanctity for demons the sanctity of the tree for elves. In return, he asked the elf Granada of the Maple Tribe to swear on the world tree loyalty to him for 50 years. Granada was surprised by this strange demon's behavior, but agreed on the condition that he sees the Demon King who sent Piers. Here, Piers surprised him by revealing his true identity as the Demon King. Granada was shocked by what he said. Granada mocked this claim, denouncing the idea that a Demon King would come himself to buy a slave, especially since their power weakens the further they get from their tower. He challenged Piers sarcastically that he would pledge allegiance for 100 years instead of 50 if he proved his words true. The scene shifted immediately to the 5th floor of Piers' tower, where Granada found himself suddenly there. Piers reminded him of the 100-year promise, making Granada realize he was before a real Demon King. Granada started complaining about the tower's emptiness, pointing out the lack of anything up to the 3rd floor. His disapproval increased when he saw the 4th floor contained only nature without any monsters, wondering sarcastically how Piers plans to stop heroes with such a dilapidated tower. He assured him that at this rate he wouldn't last a single year before heroes tore him apart, refusing to work in a place like this. Piers responded with immense pressure from his raw demonic energy, reminding the elf of the contract concluded between them. Granada felt extreme terror from that overwhelming power, certain he was in the presence of a real Demon King. Gradually, he realized a terrifying truth. The tower, despite its emptiness, is located in the Regressed mountains full of disaster-level monsters, yet no monster attacked them while coming, meaning those monsters fear this Demon King. Granada bowed to reality and swore the oath of loyalty on the name of the Great World Tree, pledging service for 100 years. Deep down, he hoped to get his revenge through an evil plan the king would assign him, but Piers shocked him with his first request and asked him to prepare a meal for him. The elf stood stunned and not comprehending the matter. While cutting vegetables in the kitchen, he wondered in confusion why he was doing this housework instead of participating in an evil scheme. Princess Ernan joined him and offered help enthusiastically, increasing the elf's confusion about what was happening in this place. Everyone moved to the dining room on the 5th floor, where they sat around a bountiful table. Granada asked his master hesitantly about the girl's identity, for Piers to reveal to him that she is the first Princess Ernan Hilderan. Granada was struck by another shock, screaming madly in his master's face for kidnapping the crown princess. He returned to questioning the utility of the empty tower against the upcoming hero attack, but Piers didn't care, and ordered him to sit and eat, explaining that this is the real reason for buying him. His cooking skill is excellent. The princess also sat smiling, while the elf drowned in complete confusion at this surreal situation. In the end, the elf wondered if Piers intended to make him fight the heroes on the 4th floor, but Piers denied that, confirming that if the heroes reached there, the game would have already ended because they would have crossed the Regressed mountains. Piers revealed to Granada his intention to make him a spy, stirring unrest in the human world on his behalf, but pointed out the necessity of doing something else before that. He explained his need to test the elf's skills, which made Granada wonder to himself in amazement how to defeat a Demon King inside his tower. Piers offered conditions for the confrontation, fighting with one hand and without using demonic energy, in exchange for reducing the contract duration by 50 years if the elf won. Granada accepted the challenge enthusiastically, vowing to give his all in this duel. The clash began with fast and sudden movements. Piers praised his opponent's movements, which were not affected by long years of slavery, wondering if he had absorbed mana from the fourth floor or enhanced his physical abilities, describing his style as fitting for the elf race. Granada responded with a powerful magical attack, confirming his abilities exceed a normal elf, and warning Piers against the mistake of choosing the opponent and place. The elf managed to bind Piers' foot with magical plant roots. He saw in that a golden opportunity to reclaim his 50 years, considering his opponent's defenses completely exposed. He directed a direct, confident strike towards Piers, but he was suddenly shocked by the aura of terrifying power and remembered with horror who he was facing. Piers assured him he would keep his promise not to use demonic energy, and that he would control his power to avoid killing him. Granada tried to stop him in panic, but Piers delivered a powerful punch that ended the confrontation. The scene shifted to the city of Horton Walk, where the Crimson Falcon mercenary headquarters is. The mercenaries welcomed Piers very warmly this time, expressing their honor to meet him again. He offered to hire their services for a year, so the leader agreed, immediately asking about the budget, while one member was mumbling indignantly about their leader fawning over the person who beat them up. Piers threw a heavy bag full of gold as a down payment. The mercenaries declared their eternal loyalty to him, claiming loyalty as their trait, while their leader thought seriously about replacing them with another squad in the future. He ordered them to include the man accompanying him in their team, explaining he would convey his orders from now on, which caused hesitation among mercenaries at first. Granada stepped forward and introduced himself. Signs of misery and crying appeared on the mercenaries' faces as they embraced Granada after noticing his smashed face, a result of Piers beating him, which made them feel affinity towards him after they suffered the same fate. Piers thought to himself that these mercenaries, despite their average appearance, are professionals working in the Regressed region and cannot be easily replaced, and that the only hero who agreed to the Hilderan Kingdom's request is the hero Helan Cargill, who defeated the Demon King of Lust. Piers addressed the mercenaries as their new leader. Piers revealed the first mission, which is investigating the matter of the hero Helan Cargill, employed by the Kingdom of Hilderan. The mercenaries responded with enthusiasm and seriousness, declaring their obedience to orders. Piers returned to his tower, thinking about the next step after leaving the hero's matter to Granada. He decided the time had come to increase his personal power. Given that he sold all demonic energy points usually used to enhance the tower or king, his only remaining option to increase power is another means. His choice fell on the soul flower, a mana crystal that sprouts after absorbing nature's energy and grants its eater immense power. Piers thought to himself that the Regressed Mountains, due to harsh mana storms and strong monsters, their nature remained virgin, untouched by human hands, making soul flowers absorb nature's mana for long years and become extremely pure. He considered the place a buried treasure for these flowers, and although less effective than demonic energy, it is better than nothing, deciding to go look for them. Gordon warned him of the danger of going without preparation, likening it to searching for a needle in a haystack, and reminding him that monsters would attack him as soon as they saw a chance. Piers replied confidently that he could handle monsters easily, but acknowledged the difficulty of finding the flowers, as Gordon mentioned, unless he possessed an excellent mana detector. Their conversation was interrupted by a light knock on the door. Princess Ernan poked her head in, with a cute blue slime creature on her head, asking if they were busy. Piers and Gordon were surprised to see her. The princess went out happily, running and playing with the elemental spirits filling the place, and seemed very enjoying. The princess expressed her extreme enthusiasm, admitting she had been bored recently, and reminded Piers of his promise to allow her to decorate the fourth floor as she pleased. Piers stood amazed watching her, that she had already decorated the place to her taste, wondering how far she would go with that, and that her mere thought of decorating a Demon King's tower is a crazy matter in itself. The princess turned to him with a shy smile, admitting she didn't expect to be allowed to leave the tower, but she was happy she came to check. Piers suddenly carried her in his arms, asking her to hold on tight, and flew her out of the tower before she comprehended what was happening. He took off with her, flying in the sky at great speed. The princess looked at the world from above with wide, amazed eyes, admitting she didn't notice the beauty of the scenery because she was kidnapped in the dark. The view of the sunrise and clouds dazzled her, and she mumbled in amazement about how vast the world is. She remembered her monotonous life in the palace, where every day was a repetition of the previous one from magical training and studying rule, believing she would spend her whole life like that until she died. She told Piers that she might be the only person who flew over the Regressed Mountains. Piers didn't care about the information, but directed her attention to the task required of her. The princess asked him to call her by her name Ernan, since they would spend a long time together. Piers agreed but scolded her for forgetting her position, threatening to transfer her to the underground prison if she didn't use her spirits to find the soul flowers. Ernan apologized and used her water and wind spirit to search. Piers expected the search to take time, but he was confident they would be faster than him. Suddenly, Ernan shouted that she found something. Piers landed in the specified location to find monsters around the flower and said there were guests who beat them to it. A group of huge monsters appeared, and Piers explained to the princess that monsters are a demon breed that left the demon world, asking them to obey his orders as a demon king, not touch the flower, and leave. But the monsters refused to obey, declaring they don't listen to demons' words and don't like them, and threatened to kill him. Piers laughed sarcastically, acknowledging Gordon was right, and realized his mistake in expecting logical thinking from monsters, deciding to burn them all and turn them to ash. The monsters attacked fiercely, screaming with intent to kill and protect what they consider theirs. The battle began amidst screams of pain and burning. The monsters attacked Piers, screaming in anger, but Piers burned everyone who stood in his way. One of the monsters directed his orders to hit the weakest first, pointing at Ernan. The monsters rushed towards her with immense force, but Piers fired scorching flames towards them, finishing them all off. While Ernan stood firm, remembering that orcs of the Bull tribe are known for their ability to bring down ogres if they cooperate, yet she saw them helpless even to get close to her. Piers released immense demonic energy, making Ernan realize its destructive power. In a moment, the scene turned into total destruction, where Piers stood alone amidst corpses. Ernan was amazed by the purity of mana emitting from a ruby spiritual flower with water and ice attributes she found amidst the snow, but Piers warned her against being greedy for it. Piers promised he would give her one if she found more, which made her eyes shine with joy and enthusiasm, and he commented sarcastically that humans only get excited by rewards. But unfortunately, Ernan didn't find any other flower despite her strenuous search until exhaustion. They returned to Piers' tower, where Piers thought about Ernan, and that she is the first princess of Hildurin, and Piers mumbled that he thought it was a mistake at first. Piers realized she might be more useful than he expected. Gordon told Piers that he received a sudden and quick call from Granada, where Granada told him that the hero Hylan Cargill and 32 other heroes had left the capital, but they are not heading towards the Regressed mountains. He explained they would follow the classic hero path, forming a team, then growing through villager quests, and increasing their strength during the journey. Gordon offered alternative plans for the hero's journey, asking Piers to read them carefully, but Piers surprised Gordon by throwing those plans aside, which aroused his astonishment. Piers announced his shocking decision not to send any monsters or obstacles to hinder the hero's journey this time. He justified that incomplete obstacles do nothing but make heroes stronger, and ordered Gordon to convey this message to Granada and accompany the heroes with the mercenaries to gain their trust. Gordon commented that his master, as usual, doesn't follow traditional standards and wondered anxiously how to stop heroes with their current tower. Piers reassured him he would reinforce the tower, but using a dwarf. Gordon objected strongly, considering that the presence of a dwarf alongside a human and an elf in the tower would make them a laughingstock. Piers scoffed at his followers' grumbling. Piers explained he didn't intend to rely on the dwarf himself, but on magical tools made by dwarves. He explained his diabolical idea. Since heroes are used to Demon King standards, they would expect weak monsters on the first floor, but they would be surprised by dozens of cannons. Gordon realized the heroes wouldn't be ready for that. Gordon shook his head in despair, admitting this plan strays far from familiar standards. Suddenly, Gordon screamed in panic, pointing out another kidnapping that just happened. The scene shifted to the city of Wolfnir, the underground city of dwarves. There, Logar Friedrich, the best blacksmith among dwarves, was practicing his work skillfully. Logar seemed indifferent, unaware that he became the next target for the rebellious Demon King planning to kidnap him. At that moment, Burge realized that he was next on the Demon King's abduction list. Before his regression, he had fought countless dwarves, yet this was his first time actually setting foot in their city. He bribed the guard at the entrance with human gold and casually inquired about the best blacksmith in the area. The dwarf smirked as he pocketed the coins, remarking that Burge, for a human, understood business quite well. Burge fully suppressed his demonic aura, carefully masking his true identity. For such a small bribe, the directions came quickly. The guard explained that Burge should enter the city, locate the massive pit, take the lift, and submit to an identity check that would determine his assigned floor. He added that the security was twofold and that no intruders were permitted. However, Burge had no intention of undergoing verification. Instead, he simply descended straight to the lowest level. From there, he made his way toward the deepest chamber, the very heart of Wolfnir, where the legendary blacksmith Loya worked. The first thing Burge noticed was the man's technique. The metal shimmered with mana so fluid that it appeared as though the flames themselves were dancing. For a brief moment, Burge wondered whether this truly was the finest blacksmith, though he decided he could confirm that after abducting him. He moved with lightning speed, attempting to seize the dwarf and escape, but his target was far from ordinary. A surge of fire erupted from the forge, engulfing Burge in blistering heat. Loya did not hesitate, following up by swinging a massive hammer at him. Burge immediately sensed that the flame carried a trace of demonic power and found it suspicious. Blocking the hammer with one hand despite the bones in his arm cracking from the impact, Burge calmly asked whether Loya was a hero. Loya lifted his chin with pride and declared that he was indeed a hero, condemning the audacity of a demon entering dwarven lands and vowing that Burge would not leave alive. In response, Burge revealed his trademark Demon King grin and mocked Loya, stating that despite all the bravado, he was quite weak. He then corrected Loya by clarifying that he was not merely a demon, but the Demon King himself. With effortless strength, Burge slammed the hammer into the ground and seized Loya by the throat, lifting him off his feet. Guards rushed toward the chamber upon hearing the disturbance, only to find it completely empty. Panic spread as it became clear that a demon intruder had kidnapped the blacksmith and vanished high above the city onto a terrace. Burge warned his captive that any attempt to make a sound would result in death. Still trembling, Loya demanded to know why the Demon King had come to such a place and questioned whether the princess was the target. Burge dismissed the notion, stating that he had no interest in dwarven royalty. Instead, he pressed Loya for information about the city's secret underground passages, emergency routes known only to blacksmiths. Loya assumed that this was precisely how the princess would eventually be kidnapped, and he knew that even if he tried, he could not stop Burge. Despite his earlier bravado, the truth was that he was utterly terrified of Demon Kings. Even so, he refused to answer. In response, Burge leaned in and coldly explained that if Loya remained uncooperative, he would kidnap the princess instead, and then release him, making it appear as though Loya had betrayed her to save his own life. Burge vividly described the rumors, disgrace, and torture that would follow, knowing that Loya already lacked a reputation for courage. Such accusations would be easily believed, condemning him to a living hell. Burge then presented him with a final choice: walk alongside him or sell out the princess and cling to false hope. Loya remained silent, though inwardly he began plotting how to escape while still handing over the princess. Burge recognized him as a greedy schemer and, to seal the arrangement, swore an oath on the Demon King's standard, guaranteeing Loya's safety in exchange for cooperation. Among dwarves, such an oath was sacred, and a Demon King was believed never to break it. Instantly, Loya's demeanor changed. He became confident, obedient, and almost cheerful, a transformation that nearly made Burge gag. Meanwhile, deep within the city, Princess Louise paced anxiously after discovering that Loya had vanished while crafting her weapon. Although the guards explained that he had been taken, her concern only intensified. When they insisted that he had been kidnapped, she snapped at them, ordering them to be silent and insisting that a hero could not possibly be abducted. One guard nervously attempted to reason with her, acknowledging that while Loya was a hero, he was also a poor fighter. His words earned him a murderous glare, and the princess demanded that they find Loya immediately, threatening execution if they failed. No one dared argue after that. Elsewhere, deep within Loya's hidden tunnel network, Burge was rapidly losing patience. The passage was so narrow that he was forced to walk directly behind the dwarf the entire way, an experience he found unbearable. He snarled for Loya to move faster, threatening to burn the tunnel down if he had to endure the view any longer. Loya laughed nervously and explained that the tunnels had never been designed for tall individuals. After what felt like hours, they finally emerged outside the city. Loya brushed himself off in relief and declared that his task was complete, announcing his intention to leave. At that moment, Burge shifted into his demonic form, his wings spreading like a shadow that swallowed the moon, and questioned the nonsense Loya was speaking. Loya froze and reminded Burge that he had sworn an oath on the Demon King's standard. Burge merely shrugged and stated that worthless vows meant nothing to him. Just like that, Loya became the newest victim on the Demon King's list. Panic seized him instantly, and he regretted not betraying the princess earlier. Desperate, Loya insisted that he was useful, boasting that no one could rival his metallurgical skills and that he could craft anything Burge desired. Burge frowned, questioning how a hero could so readily offer his services to a demon. Loya no longer cared about honor or morality, choosing survival over pride. In response, Burge issued one final command, ordering him to swear loyalty to him. Loya immediately smashed his forehead against the ground, swearing his loyalty and expressing gratitude for the mercy shown to him. However, even as he did so, he was already plotting his escape in his mind. Unfortunately, plans meant nothing once someone lost consciousness. Moments later, Leia regained awareness in a serene garden surrounded by spirits, feeling confused, dizzy, and deeply terrified. Gordon was already pacing around him and angrily remarked that they had kidnapped a hero, specifically a dwarf hero. Urge quickly gestured for silence before the situation could escalate. Shortly after, Bernada appeared on a floating screen and questioned whether Verge had seriously brought a dwarf inside. Verge cut him off immediately, stating that the report could wait until later. Ignoring the surrounding chaos, Princess Granada walked straight up to Leia and examined him calmly. She asked whether he had come to rescue her, then paused and concluded that he probably had not. Leia was still unable to comprehend what was happening and wondered why he was there, reminding Verge that he had been promised safety. Verge responded with a smirk, explaining that Leia was still alive precisely because of that promise. He added that he had knocked Leia unconscious and carried him there because he could not trust what a panicking dwarf might do. Leia let out a forced, awkward laugh and dryly remarked that the situation was wonderful. Verge wasted no time and assigned Leia his first task. He ordered him to install a large number of cannons on the first floor, stating that if any heroes appeared, he wanted them completely annihilated. Leia swallowed nervously at the mention of cannons, but nevertheless agreed. The scene then shifted to the hero's journey preparation station. A holographic communication link flickered to life, and Granada began delivering his report. With practiced calm, he informed his superior that rumors were spreading rapidly among the heroes. According to the latest intelligence, the newly emerged Demon King was believed to wield black flames, prompting the heroes to equip themselves with fire-resistant gear in preparation for what they considered inevitable combat. Granada continued by reporting another circulating rumor, explaining that many heroes believed the Demon King had refrained from deploying demonic beasts out of fear. From their perspective, his continued silence was not seen as strategy, but as weakness. Verdilis listened to the report without any visible reaction, his expression indifferent and his posture unmoving. When he finally spoke, he remarked flatly that the heroes clearly had not yet lost their killing intent. Whether they were driven by the pursuit of glory through battle or by the promise of wealth through conquest, he said it made no difference. He declared that none of them would gain anything from this journey and that, in the end, they would lose everything, eventually even their desire to fight. Before ending the holographic call, Verdilis issued a final order, instructing Granada to continue monitoring the heroes closely and to report any changes without delay. Granada acknowledged the command and promptly terminated the transmission. Left alone, Verdilis reflected inwardly. By deliberately withholding demonic beasts, Vera was quietly eroding the heroes' morale and distorting their expectations. More than that, it was becoming increasingly clear to him that this Demon King possessed an unsettling understanding of human psychology. Verdilis wondered whether there had ever been a Demon King like him before. The thought sent a rare chill through him, followed immediately by genuine relief, as he reminded himself that Verdilis was not his enemy. The scene shifted once more to Verdilis's tower, standing cold and imposing. Vera issued a direct command to the logger Friedrich, ordering that fire cannons be installed on the tower's first floor. However, he imposed one critical restriction, stating that monastones were not to be used. The logger panicked immediately and argued that constructing such weapons without manastones was nearly impossible, and that even if they were completed, they would be ineffective against heroes. Verdilis cut him off sharply, his tone allowing no resistance, and stated that finding a solution was the logger's responsibility. Verdilis then explained that heroes were favored by the dimension itself, granting them extraordinarily sharp energy perception. Any trap powered by mana stones would be detected long before it could be activated, which was precisely why mana stones could not be used. The logger attempted to protest again, but Verdilis's expression darkened. Calmly, a sphere of black magic formed in his hand as he reminded the logger that he had been brought there because he was regarded as the greatest blacksmith. If he failed to meet expectations, Verdilis warned that there was no shortage of others who could replace him. Terrified, the logger broke down, his voice shaking as he hastily claimed that there was another method. Verdilis responded with a chilling smile and remarked that the logger should have mentioned it sooner. The logger explained that he had once invented a device capable of completely concealing mana traces. Developing it had taken 3 full years, but the finished prototype still remained in his workshop back in Wolfner. Verdilis's face hardened immediately as he demanded to know whether this claim was merely another desperate excuse. Crying and trembling, the logger swore that he was telling the truth. After a brief pause, Verdilis chose to believe him, though not without insurance. He fastened a purple rune-etched collar around the logger's neck. When the logger asked what it was, Verdilis explained casually that it was a magical restraint capable of separating his head from his body instantly, activated with a single gesture. With a thin, ominous smile, He added that the collar also distorted perception, preventing others from clearly seeing the logger's face. If the logger ever attempted to remove it, Verdelas would interpret that act as an attempt to escape, and death would immediately follow. Fully understanding the situation, the logger collapsed in fear and swore that no matter what happened, he would never attempt to remove the collar. After issuing his orders, Barrett departed alongside Logger. Together, they traveled across several kingdoms to procure rare supplies and mana-compatible materials. The journey lasted nearly a full month. Throughout that time, Verdula stored everything they gathered inside his spatial pocket, carefully preserving each material needed for his preparations. Once their task was complete, they returned to Wolfner, the dwarf kingdom. By the time they arrived, chaos had already erupted within the city. A massive boulder suddenly crashed down near a group of dwarves, shattering stone and scattering debris in all directions. At the center of the destruction stood Princess Louise Verf, her fury impossible to conceal. She angrily declared that a month and a half had already passed, yet the dwarves still had not located Logger. She harshly berated them for their incompetence and demanded to know how much longer she was expected to wait. An elderly dwarf stepped forward nervously in an attempt to calm her. He explained that Logger had excavated countless underground tunnels over the years, and that their forces were currently investigating every known passage. However, he admitted that it was highly likely Logger had already escaped the city. Louise immediately snapped back, stating that it was only natural for him to flee and that it would have been foolish for him to remain behind. She then asserted with certainty that Logger must have been kidnapped. In a sudden outburst, she grabbed the old dwarf by the face and lifted him off the ground. Coldly, she announced that she would grant them 2 weeks. If the kidnapper was not found by then, she declared that every one of them would die. Terrified, the elderly dwarf hastily swore that they would succeed. Louise released him and sharply ordered the soldiers to collapse every tunnel Logger had ever created. The dwarves immediately scrambled to obey without hesitation. As the soldiers rushed off, attention returned to Princess Louise. It was evident that her physique was far from ordinary. At that moment, a hidden section of the wall behind her shifted silently. One of Logger's secret tunnels slid open, its mechanism almost completely soundless. Louise instantly sensed the disturbance and spun around, her gaze sharpening. Because of the face recognition interference mask, she was unable to identify the figure who emerged. Even so, she immediately recognized the tunnel itself. In a cold voice, she stated that only Logger knew of such hidden passages and demanded to know whether the man standing before her was him. Logger froze in place as panic overwhelmed him, and after struggling briefly, he barely managed to address her by her title in a trembling voice. Louise cracked her knuckles, fury flashing across her face, and angrily remarked that the bastard had actually dared to return alive. A furious smile spread across her lips as golden vines of aura erupted violently around her body. She accused him of hiding because he did not want to forge her weapon. Tears streamed down Logger's face as he desperately denied the accusation, insisting that she had misunderstood everything. His denial only fueled her rage. She snapped back sharply, reminding him that she was a princess and accusing him of gravely insulting her by claiming that she was mistaken. With absolute authority, she declared that from that moment onward, he would become her slave, bound to forge weapons for her for the rest of his life. Golden aura surged around her fist as she drew it back, stating that before anything else, she would punish him for running away. Before her punch could land, a violent blast erupted between them. Princess Louise was hurled backward through the air and slammed into the ground. However, she immediately steadied herself, planting one hand down and regaining her balance with ease as dust billowed outward before slowly settling. When visibility returned, Verdilla stepped forward calmly and instructed Logger to retrieve the equipment at once. Louise glared at the newcomer, unable to discern his identity due to the interference effect, and demanded to know who he was and why he was helping a dwarf. In a flat, emotionless tone, he introduced himself as the master of the blacksmith she had just been extorting. Princess Louise leapt into the air, rage blazing across her face, and declared that the blacksmith was her slave and would forge her weapon for the rest of his life. The two collided midair, their fists meeting at terrifying speed. Shockwaves tore through the surrounding space as each exchange sent ripples of force outward. Amid the relentless barrage, Verdilla suddenly spotted an opening and swung his leg toward her neck. To his surprise, Louise caught the strike mid-air with one hand. The sheer strength of her grip caused his eyes to narrow. Before he could recover, she countered with a brutal punch that sent him flying upward and crashing into the ceiling above. She turned her head slightly and coldly informed Logger that it was now his turn. At that moment, Verdilla reappeared, seized Louise by the head, and slammed her downward. The two immediately began exchanging blows at terrifying speed, shockwaves rippling through the chamber as debris was hurled into the air. Their clash resembled a battle between seasoned monsters rather than mortals. Era recognized her instantly as the second daughter of Princess Vere. Though she was not officially a hero, her strength was exceptional. Even before his regression, Louise had been among the strongest individuals he had known, far stronger than she currently was. He calculated quickly that if she were allowed to grow any further, she would become a serious threat. Killing her now would be the logical choice. However, doing so would require unleashing his full demonic power, which was a dangerous gamble in his current weakened state. If her soldiers witnessed his true strength, his identity as the Demon King would be exposed. As their fists continued to collide in blinding exchanges of golden and violet energy, Logger worked desperately in the background, dismantling a massive structure piece by piece. During a brief opening, Verdila turned toward him and demanded to know whether everything was ready. Logger replied in panic that he was still dismantling the device, explaining that it was a massive mana phantom machine designed to erase and conceal mana traces, and admitting that the mechanism was far larger than he had anticipated. Verdila snarled that if Logger valued his life, he had exactly 1 minute to finish. Logger frantically swore that he was moving as fast as possible. From the opposite side, Louise's aura flared violently as 12 blazing streams of golden power erupted from her body, and she demanded to know who had given them permission to act. Verdila glanced toward Logger and stated flatly that if the situation worsened, he would abandon him without hesitation. Pale with terror, Logger promised that he was nearly finished. Verdila clenched his jaw, uncertain how much longer he could continue fighting without tapping into his full demonic reserves, as every passing second pushed him closer to exposure, while both their mana outputs collapsed at a terrifying speed. Louise shouted that she did not care where Bear had come from and declared that he would not leave the place alive. She then turned her fury on Logger, proclaiming that she would break his legs so he could never escape again. Verdila laughed darkly and remarked that she sounded more like a demon king than he did. He told her to give up, stating that he intended to take her, the blacksmith, and all the equipment with him. At that moment, Logger shouted that the dismantling was complete. The instant the machine was disabled, the flow of mana shifted violently throughout the chamber. Louise snarled that she would no longer hold back if Logger believed he could simply return and steal what belonged to her. Verdila launched his opening strike, driving his foot straight into Louise's chest. The blow sent her crashing downward and smashing into the ground as a violent explosion tore through the chamber. Without hesitation, Verdila opened his subspace pocket and ordered Logger to move immediately. Louise rose from the dust and declared that such attacks were meaningless against her. However, her words faltered when she realized that the Baria Verg dealer and the machine were both gone. Moments later, her soldiers arrived and asked what had happened. Louise scoffed at them, calling them slow and asking whether they intended to arrive only after she was dead. She ordered them to pursue Logger through the tunnels at once. Then she stopped. The tunnels had already collapsed, and she ground her teeth as realization dawned on her. Louise finally understood the truth. Logger had truly never intended to return and forge her weapon. A cold smile spread across her face as wind swept through the ruined chamber. She declared that the situation was far more interesting than she had expected. Her eyes burning with excitement and her grin twisted. She swore that she would personally hunt Logger down, even if she had to scour the entire continent, and vowed that when she found him, she would make him regret everything he had done. Inside the first floor of Breeze J Tower, the Demon King stood before a massive magical apparatus. His posture was calm and his gaze unwavering as he carefully examined the towering structure. He stated firmly that this was the magic they needed to stop the hero and declared that no matter the cost, he required the device. Behind him, Princess Hildryn, the first princess of the Hildaran kingdom, widened her eyes in disbelief as she took in its sheer scale and murmured that it was enormous. Nearby, Logar, the Demon King's loyal servant, tilted his head in confusion and asked what exactly the device was supposed to do, his voice unsettled. He added that he had been in the middle of cleaning when everything had suddenly started, gesturing toward the reinforced structure installed beside the tool. Logar then straightened and reported that the Monopan's framework was complete and that the installation had finished successfully. The Demon King gave a brief nod and ordered that it be activated immediately. Logar replied without hesitation that he understood. Moments later, the Demon King released his dark energy. A terrifying purple aura burst forth, spreading throughout the floor as oppressive pressure filled the air. His voice turned cold as he remarked that after everything it had taken to bring the device there, it had better be worth it. Logar visibly trembled under the demonic presence but forced himself to respond that activation was already in progress. As the enchantment concluded, the magical tool roared to life. Mana surged violently through the surroundings, and blue lightning wrapped itself around the tower, illuminating everything in its path. Princess Hildryn raised an arm to shield her eyes and exclaimed that the light was blinding. At that moment, a translucent system screen appeared before the Demon King, notifying him that the tower had recognized the Monophantom and that synchronization would require 10,000 points, asking whether he wished to proceed. The Demon King lifted his gaze to the screen and muttered that the tower possessed such a function, before agreeing to confirm it himself. Another display appeared showing his available resources, indicating that he had 11,182 points. He selected synchronization without hesitation. A notification confirmed that synchronization was complete and that 11,182 points remained. A final update followed, stating that the Monophantom had recognized the Demon King as its master, that processing was complete, and that the Monophantom's power source had been fully converted from mana to demonic energy. The protagonist lifted his head and called out to Logar. Logar, brimming with excitement, immediately shook his head in denial and insisted that he had not interfered in any way. With barely contained enthusiasm, he admitted that he had never imagined it would be possible to merge the Monopan with the tower, let alone convert its power source entirely. He declared it a discovery of the century, something even the device's original creator could never have foreseen. At that moment, Princess Hildryn stepped forward, her eyes sparkling with excitement as she gazed at the awakened structure and remarked that it was incredible. The protagonist turned toward her and casually suggested that she try using a spell. Princess Hildryn eagerly agreed, clearly delighted by the opportunity to test what felt like a brand new toy, and cheerfully announced that she would use whichever spell she wanted. She began chanting as magical symbols formed in the air and a massive, vividly colored sphere of magic took shape before her. Logar's face instantly drained of color as he shouted in panic for her to wait, insisting that he had just finished cleaning the tower. He desperately begged her to stop and warned her not to treat the place like some kind of playground. The protagonist, however, ignored the commotion and focused on the phenomenon itself. He reasoned that a spell of such magnitude should normally be detectable far beyond the tower's walls. He moved toward the entrance and peered outside, only to frown slightly when he could neither see nor sense any trace of the spell beyond the door. He muttered that this must be the effect of a tower synchronized with a monofan. Curiosity stirred within him, and he extended his demonic energy outward, attempting to manipulate the tower in its current state. His hand shimmered and his expression shifted to shock as the tower vanished completely from existence. A moment later, he spread his arm once more and the tower instantly reappeared exactly as before. Realization struck him, and he stated slowly that he could conceal the tower whenever he wished and summon it back at will. The implication alone was astonishing. A faint glimmer of demonic energy flickered in his eyes as a restrained smile formed on his lips. He concluded calmly that using this power freely was still difficult for now, but that it would become invaluable in the future. Meanwhile, outside the inner chamber, Logar could no longer restrain himself. His voice echoed loudly as he begged for permission, insisting that he only wanted a small opportunity to examine the device. His excitement quickly spiraled out of control as he impulsively requested permission to dismantle both the magical tool and the tower, only to hastily correct himself and clarify that he merely wished to examine them strictly for research purposes. Logar proclaimed that throughout all recorded history, past or present, he had never encountered anything remotely similar. He earnestly begged to be allowed to study what he described as a historic discovery, his behavior teetering on the edge of outright frenzy. The protagonist observed him closely with a sharp, appraising gaze, remarking internally that Logar sounded more like a demon eager for battle than a scholar. Even so, he could not deny how completely Logar had lost control of himself. After a brief moment of deliberation, the protagonist finally delivered his decision, stating that Logar would be permitted to do as he wished after completely eradicating the heroes trapped on the first floor. At those words, Logar's eyes gleamed as crimson energy surged around his body. He swore that he would crush those cunning heroes without mercy. Without saying anything further, he immediately began chanting, fully immersing himself in what he regarded as his examination. Leaving Logar behind, the protagonist turned his attention toward Princess Hildryn. In a calm voice, he proposed that she confront the heroes who had managed to reach the fourth floor. Princess Hildryn froze in place, clearly startled by the suggestion, and questioned whether he truly meant for her to do so, emphasizing that she was a princess. There was a note of protest in her tone, though it sounded more playful than genuinely offended. The protagonist replied evenly that she was also a gifted spirit and that she had no intention of returning to the royal palace. Even as he spoke, he acknowledged internally the weight of his decision. Assigning her such a role might indeed be unreasonable. She was still an innocent princess, unfamiliar with the cruelty of the world, and asking her to stand against her own kind carried undeniable gravity. Princess Hildryn fell silent, uncertain of what she could even fight with, as possibilities such as fire and water flickered through her mind. Before those thoughts could take root, the protagonist stopped her, explaining that none of that would be necessary. All she needed to do, he said, was disrupt the heroes and openly reveal herself as their enemy. If the plan succeeded, he promised to grant her another wish. She met his gaze with a serious expression and slowly nodded, agreeing to do it, but only on the condition that she be introduced as his subordinate rather than as a princess. The protagonist blinked briefly in surprise before accepting her request without hesitation. Princess Hilderin's face lit up instantly, her joy resembling that of a delighted kitten. She thanked him brightly and promised that she would do her best. Blinking playfully, she then asked whether she was supposed to charm the heroes with her appearance, confidently suggesting that they would surely fall for her. The protagonist cut her off flatly, instructing her to do exactly as she had been told. She nodded obediently, acknowledging that she understood. Sometime later, the protagonist sat in silence, his attention fixed on the system screen hovering before him. As he studied it, he reviewed the preparations already underway. On the first floor, the heroes' numbers would be thinned through overwhelming mass mana cannon fire. On the fourth floor, Princess Hilderin would serve as bait, drawing the survivors in so they could be finished off. Even so, with more than 200 heroes advancing, he found the plan insufficient. This strategy alone would not eliminate even half of them. That left only one remaining option, strengthening himself further. His gaze shifted to the radiant treasure resting in his hand, around which dense demonic energy coiled as it shimmered faintly. He recognized it as an icy water elemental spirit blossom, a flawless creation in his eyes. Spirit blossoms corrupted by demonic energy were exceptionally potent, effective even against demons themselves. He resolved to acquire more of them. Elsewhere, Princess Hilderin stood within a land of endless snow and biting cold. She surveyed the frozen surroundings before sighing softly, remarking that there was nothing there either, and wondering what they should do next, noting that it was already their third attempt. The protagonist replied that perhaps their earlier success had been nothing more than luck. Princess Hilderin nodded faintly, admitting that it did feel strange. At that moment, a towering figure suddenly appeared before them. The protagonist immediately raised his arm, dark energy gathering around it as irritation crept into his voice. He demanded to know whether the intruder had returned yet again, coldly expressing his growing weariness of such interruptions. The massive man released a deep, rumbling sound and bowed his head, respectfully introducing himself as Kyoto of the Blue Forest tribe and offering his greetings to the Demon King. Lowering himself even further, he pleaded that his people had come seeking protection. The protagonist regarded him with an icy stare and questioned whether he was asking to be taken in as kin. At once, the gathered tribes dropped to their knees and their leader spoke on behalf of them all. He explained that their ancestors had once been demons who betrayed the demon realm and that, because they bore that original sin, they now sought the honor of serving the Demon King. Looking down at them with a cold, unyielding gaze, the protagonist dismissed their words as mere flattery, stating bluntly that they simply sought to grow stronger by becoming his kin. Narrowing his eyes slightly, he added that they were better suited to demonic energy than relying on spirit blossoms. An orc elder turned to his subordinates and nodded slowly, admitting that their intentions had been seen through and that there was no reason to hesitate any longer. He ordered them to bring it out. A box was opened before them, revealing a grim lotus sealed within a casing of icy frost. The protagonist's eyes sharpened as he recognized it instantly, muttering that this was the reason it had eluded them. He glanced back at the orcs and remarked that this had clearly been prepared in advance, noting with faint amusement that they even knew how to negotiate, an unusual trait for a tribe known more for brute force than intellect. The orcs lowered their heads, explaining that survival in such a land demanded wisdom above all else and that their tribe valued intelligence more than raw strength. The protagonist handed the box to Princess Hilderin before turning back to the orc tribe. He stated calmly that they had come to him because they lacked strength and sought power. The orc leader listened intently, not daring to interrupt. A faint smile curved the protagonist's lips as he repeated their words about valuing wisdom over strength, adding that he liked that mindset. Raising his hand, he began to chant and announced that he would accept only one. He then named Kyoto. In the next instant, a demonic sigil materialized and embedded itself into Kyoto's body. Dark power flooded the snowy field as the protagonist spoke again, ordering Kyoto to roam the land, expand his tribe under his authority, and await further commands. He promised that he would grant a reward far greater than mere strength and declared with absolute certainty that Kyoto's tribe would gain permanence under his rule. Demonic energy completely engulfed Kyoto. His body twisted and reshaped as he transcended, becoming a true demon. Kyoto fell to one knee and bowed deeply, offering his life and loyalty to the Demon King. Behind him, the rest of the tribe followed suit, kneeling in unison. The scene then shifted to Algest Mountain Tower, where power surged throughout the entire structure. Outside, an orc legion assembled in disciplined ranks. On the first floor, Logar stood prepared alongside 60 monocannons. Within his mind, the protagonist reviewed the battlefield. The orcs were positioned exactly as planned, the tower's floors were fully secured, and Princess Hilderin waited on the fourth floor. Even so, a sense of tension lingered. He carefully confirmed each stage once more before finally nodding to himself, convinced that everything was in place. Raising his gaze, his dark eyes hardened as he silently vowed to repay the humiliation of his previous life to the approaching enemy. Elsewhere, the hero looked up at the towering mountain and told Granada that they had finally arrived. Algest Mountain loomed before them as the heroes advanced onto the battlefield with a single goal: to slay the Demon King. At the heroes' preparation base, a magnificent city stood as the starting point of countless legends. Within its grand central hall, a lavish banquet was underway, held in honor of the heroes before their departure. Laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses filled the air as warriors and dignitaries celebrated the eve of their final march. Among them, a young hero clad in polished armor conversed with the elderly Lord Castellan. The Lord smiled warmly and remarked that the hero was far too modest for someone of his accomplishments. The hero respectfully thanked him for hosting such a splendid banquet. Lord Castellan humbly replied that it was an honor to witness and take part in such a historic journey, to which the hero simply nodded and expressed his gratitude for the kind words. After a brief pause, Lord Castellan suggested that the hero, Lord Hillen, should address the crowd. Hillen hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the idea, but the Lord insisted, explaining that everyone was waiting and that such a speech would greatly boost morale. Seeing no way to refuse, Hillen reluctantly agreed. Seizing the moment, Lord Castellan immediately turned and loudly announced to the hall that Lord Hillen wished to speak. All eyes shifted toward him. With the attention of the entire hall upon him, Hillen cleared his throat and stepped forward. His expression grew calm and composed as he began addressing everyone present: his comrades, fellow heroes, nobles, knights, mages, mercenaries, and merchants. Acknowledging each group with respect, he declared that their long expedition was finally approaching its climax. With confidence, he boasted that their march for justice had terrified the Demon King so thoroughly that not a single monster had dared to block their path. The hall erupted in laughter, and confidence surged through the crowd. Hillen quickly reminded them not to lower their guard, assuring them that every possible preparation had already been made. His voice grew louder and more resolute as he proclaimed that the following day would be the moment they took the head of the foolish Demon King. Raising his glass high, his words burned with righteous fury as he demanded to know who would dare kidnap the crown princess of Hildren, Princess Ern. He roared that it was time to remind the world who they truly were, and concluded with an impassioned declaration that they would show everyone who the true masters of this world were. The hall exploded in thunderous cheers. Cries for justice echoed from every corner as the crowd followed Hillen's lead, raising their glasses and shouting for everyone to eat, drink, and celebrate. Watching the chaotic celebration from a distance was Granada, the elf. Calm and observant, he noted that just as the Demon King had predicted, the size of the expedition had neither increased nor decreased. Reflecting on the speech, Granada acknowledged that Hillen's charisma was the reason the expedition had come this far. Hillen had secured funding from the guilds and kept even wavering mercenaries firmly in line. Yet Granada could not ignore his unease. He remembered that the last tower he had investigated was completely empty, which made him question whether the final confrontation would truly be this easy. A dark and treacherous thought briefly crossed his mind, causing him to wonder if he should betray the heroes now. He froze in panic and immediately berated himself for even entertaining such an idea. He reminded himself that if the Demon King were successfully subjugated, he would finally be freed from his curse, a future that clearly benefited him. Shaking his head, Granada forced himself to regain control. Determined to clear his thoughts, he decided to step outside for some fresh air and send a report. Later that night, beneath the glow of a full moon, Granada stood alone on a high balcony, quietly communicating through a faintly glowing device in his hand. From the other end, a calm voice reported that they had arrived at Horton Walk, would rest briefly, and would begin climbing the mountain the next day. The voice on the device replied briefly that it understood, then issued a strict command instructing Granada not to make contact again once he left Horton Walk. After a short pause, the voice spoke again, unmistakably belonging to the Demon King Burge. In a firm tone, he delivered his final warnings, instructing Granada to beware of the snow while climbing the mountain and to remain vigilant at night. His last warning was the most cryptic of all, as he slowly stated that when the tower door opened, Granada must never be near it. The connection ended abruptly. Granada stood frozen, completely baffled by the strange warning, and muttered to himself that he could not understand its meaning. Suddenly, a voice sounded behind him, asking what he was doing out there alone. Startled, Granada jumped and quickly turned around to find Hillen standing silently behind him. Trying to steady himself, Granada explained that he had only stepped out to get some fresh air and nervously asked if something was wrong. Hillen studied him for a moment, noticing his tense expression. With a relaxed smile, he offered Granada a drink, an elven fruit wine known to be a favorite among elves. Granada accepted it gratefully, and after taking a sip, felt the warmth ease his nerves. Hillen casually remarked that Granada seemed troubled and asked whether he truly believed they could succeed in subjugating the Demon King, following the question with a light laugh as he teasingly suggested that Granada might be nervous. Granada hesitated before quietly admitting that he was. As he spoke, Hillen stared into the surface of his own wine, watching his reflection waver as his cheerful expression slowly faded. In a quiet voice, he confessed that he himself did not know either. Granada was taken aback by the sudden honesty. Helen gazed into the distance and continued, explaining that although people trusted and followed him, assaulting a Demon King's tower was always hellish and had never been easy, not even once, as he tried to reassure Granada. Granada then mentioned that Hillen had already defeated the Demon King of Lust, implying that a newly emerged Demon King should not be as dangerous. However, as he spoke, a realization struck him because nothing was actually known about how Hillen had killed the Demon King of Lust. With a curious smile, Granada asked Hillen to share the story of that heroic victory. After a brief pause, Hillen deliberately avoided the question. His expression shifted once again, returning to that familiar, heroic charisma, and he claimed that his victory had only been possible thanks to his brave comrades, those who had always stood at the front and faced monsters head-on. Turning toward Granada, Hillen placed a firm hand on his shoulder and referred to comrades like him, addressing Granada by his title. With renewed confidence, Hillen declared that he would take the lead in the upcoming battle and requested that Granada guard his flank. He ended by stating confidently that if they fought together, victory was assured. Granada returned the smile and nodded, agreeing to the request. Satisfied, Hillen wrapped an arm around him and suggested that they go back inside. The two then walked toward the banquet hall with the hero leading his elven comrade. Helen's expression remained calm and unreadable, concealing the true nature of their alliance. Later, when he was alone with his thoughts, Hillen reflected on the conversation. A cynical smirk crossed his face as he silently affirmed his expectations. As he thought about joining forces with brave comrades, his gaze fell upon a ring set with a red gem. In that moment, his heroic demeanor vanished, revealing something far darker beneath. His true thoughts surfaced clearly as he reflected that he was counting on Granada once again. The next morning, the preparation base was already bustling, as the massive expedition finally prepared to depart and the heroes began their march. The city's citizens lined the streets, their cheers echoing loudly through the air. They shouted words of encouragement, wishing the heroes good luck and praising their leaders. Cries celebrating Lord Granada and Lord Wharton rang out from every direction at the head of the procession. Granada marched with a calm and stoic expression, his gaze fixed straight ahead. Beside him, Hillen walked proudly, basking in the admiration of the crowd with a confident smirk. The cheers grew louder, reaching a fever pitch as the people began chanting praise for Hillen Cargill. Soon, the expedition left the city far behind, and the cheers faded, replaced by silence as they entered the harsh and unforgiving canyon of the Urist mountain range. Snow-covered cliffs stretched endlessly around them, and a biting wind cut through the air. The massive force wound its way through the desolate landscape, with the cold as their only constant companion. As they traveled deeper into the mountains, some members of the expedition began chatting among themselves, and their earlier worries slowly faded. One person remarked that the weather was surprisingly mild, with barely any snow and even a clear, sunny sky, and confidently concluded that reaching the tower would be easy at this pace. Another agreed, smiling as he remarked that the goddess of victory must be watching over them. A large warrior laughed loudly, pointing out that there were no signs of the rumored disaster-class monsters. His companion smirked and replied that the monsters were probably too frightened to appear now that Hillen was leading the expedition. As the smug warrior continued boasting, his companions suddenly tapped him on the shoulder. When he pulled his hand back, he found it covered in a strange, sticky purple slime. Confused, the warrior slowly turned around and saw a towering mass of ghouls looming over them. Terror exploded through the ranks as warriors screamed in panic. One desperately shouted that there was a ghoul, his face twisted with fear. Another pointed at the monstrous figure and yelled in disbelief about its enormous size. Their confidence shattered instantly before chaos could fully consume them. At that moment, Helen's voice rang out sharply and commandingly. His eyes were filled with determination as he drew his sword and declared that the enemies had finally shown themselves. With the entire expedition force on high alert, Hillen issued an order for all units to prepare for combat. Ghouls began pouring into the canyon from all sides, and standing firm amid the chaos, Hillen shouted instructions for everyone not to panic and to protect their comrades. Quickly assessing the battlefield, he formulated a plan. He determined that the canyon was narrow and not very long, and that the knights would shield the mages and push forward to break through the enemy line. The battle erupted as steel clashed against undead flesh and magic illuminated the frozen canyon. Suddenly, a warrior screamed a warning, urgently alerting Hillen and Lord Nim that a frost giant had appeared at the front. Hillen froze as a colossal skeletal monster made entirely of ice emerged from the canyon wall, its sheer size stunning everyone present. Without hesitation, Hillen shouted for everyone to fall back. Turning to Lord Wharton, Hillen spoke decisively, declaring that he would handle the frost giant alone. As the rest of the expedition retreated from the canyon together, Wharton stared at him in shock, questioning whether Hillen truly intended to face such a massive monster by himself. Hillen replied calmly and confidently that it would not be a problem. Without another word, he leaped forward. A powerful wave of blue energy crashed into the frost giant, but the massive creature remained unmoved and completely unfazed. Hillen charged again, his movements a blur as he confronted the towering monster alone. The frost giant's crimson eyes glowed with terrifying power, its skeletal form looming ominously against the white snow. A confident grin spread across Hillen's face as he inwardly dismissed the threat, believing that a frost giant could not possibly be stronger than the demon king of lust. With a thunderous roar, the frost giant swung its gigantic arm downward, bringing it crashing toward him. Hillen countered with a powerful upward slash, and the force of his blade shattered the frost giant's icy arm, sending violent shockwaves rippling through the canyon. The monster roared in pain and fury as its attack was completely neutralized. Without allowing the frost giant any time to recover, Hillen pressed the assault. When the creature swung its remaining fist, Hillen shattered it just as effortlessly. In one fluid and overwhelming motion, his sword, crackling with blue energy, carved through the giant's massive frame. He stood firm as a beacon of raw power, relentlessly overwhelming the colossal beast. As Hillen kept the frost giant fully occupied, his eyes briefly flicked toward the rear. He spotted the perfect opening and, gathering all his remaining strength, unleashed a final and devastating flurry of slashes that completely overwhelmed the monster. Afterward, he turned and bellowed at the top of his lungs, ordering everyone to act immediately and run. The expedition force did not hesitate. Warriors, mages, and mercenaries surged past the embattled hero and the stunned frost giant, fleeing the treacherous canyon. As they ran, Lord Wharton echoed Hillen's command at full volume, urging everyone to run away. Behind them, a massive explosion erupted, serving as violent proof of Hillen's power as he continued to hold the frost giant at bay. Wharton kept shouting at his comrades to press forward, yelling that Hillen had blocked the path and that they had to seize this chance to escape. Left behind, the frost giant glared after them with glowing crimson eyes. Its skeletal body was badly damaged, yet it still radiated menace. Rage poured from it as it watched its prey slip away. Deprived of its victims, the frost giant released one final, furious roar before its body collapsed inward, self-destructing in a colossal explosion that shook the entire canyon. After escaping the immediate danger, the surviving members of the expedition stumbled into a nearby snowy forest. They collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath, their bodies trembling from exhaustion and shock. One warrior, still shaken, muttered in disbelief that they had just faced dozens of massive ghouls and a frost giant taller than a cliff, remarking that the place was utterly insane and not fit for humans. Another nodded grimly and added that even the Demon King's tower had never been this intense. A third pointed out that, despite everything, their casualties were surprisingly low and credited their survival to Lord Hillen's overwhelming strength. Soon, the discussion shifted to the source of Hillen's power. One soldier mentioned a rumor claiming that Hillen had absorbed the power of the Demon King of Lust after killing him. The idea quickly spread, leading many to conclude that Hillen must already be on par with the Demon King. One warrior went even further, suggesting that since Hillen had already slain a Demon King once, he must be even stronger now. The thought lifted their spirits, and confidence returned to their faces as they agreed that as long as they trusted Lord Hillen, there was nothing to fear. Listening to their renewed faith, Granada could not help thinking to himself that if it truly was Lord Hillen, then he might actually be able to defeat that Demon King. His thoughts were abruptly interrupted when a new threat appeared ahead of the expedition. A tribe of massive blue-skinned orcs blocked their path, led by a towering chieftain with curved horns. The hero's journey was far from over. As they struggled to catch their breath, Lord Wharton spoke grimly, his voice heavy with urgency, stating that there was no time to rest. Granada narrowed his eyes as he studied the figures blocking their path and immediately recognized them, identifying them as the Frus. Hillen's expression hardened as well. He could sense demonic energy coming from them and coldly stated that they were servants of the Demon King. The orc chieftain stepped forward, his massive frame looming over the battlefield, muscles rippling beneath blue skin. His name was Crew. A cruel grin spread across his face as he addressed the heroes in a low, mocking growl, sneering that they were foolish heroes and welcoming them to Regressed. Lord Wharton scoffed and gripped his weapon tightly, declaring that he would take care of trash like that right away. He was about to charge when Granada suddenly raised his hand. His sharp elven ears had caught something unnatural, a deep, distant rumble. He urgently told Lord Hillen to wait. The rumbling sound grew louder, and in Granada's mind, the Demon King's warning echoed clearly, cautioning him to beware of the snow. Horror spread across Granada's face as realization struck him. He whispered in fear, wondering if this was what the warning had meant. The orc chieftain, Crew, stared down at the heroes with a cold, predatory gaze and declared with absolute certainty that none of them would reach the tower. The ground began to tremble violently beneath their feet as the rumbling intensified. Cracks spread across the snow-covered mountainside, while snow and ice shifted and groaned under their own weight. The unmistakable sound of an avalanche filled the air. As the mountain gave way, Granada screamed in terror and frustration, demanding to know how they were supposed to have been aware of something like this. In his final moment of clarity, rage overwhelmed him, and he cursed the one who had orchestrated this nightmare, roaring insults at the Demon King as his voice was swallowed by the thunderous collapse of snow and ice. The disaster struck as a massive avalanche tore down the mountainside, burying the entire expedition in an instant. Snow and ice swallowed warriors, mages, and heroes alike, dragging them into frozen chaos. As he was swept away, Granada's face twisted in sheer terror. With the last of his strength, he screamed for everyone to run, but his cry was drowned out and crushed beneath the overwhelming weight of the snow. Far away, within his towering fortress, Demon King Burge sat calmly upon his throne. Before him, holographic screens displayed the unfolding catastrophe, and one by one, the images of the heroes flickered and vanished. A sinister smirk spread across his face as he softly mocked the heroes, welcoming them once again while addressing their now silent screams. With a wicked grin, Demon King Burge watched the heroes' final moments of agony, satisfied that his plan had succeeded flawlessly. Leaning back on his throne, his eyes glinting with cold satisfaction, he made a chilling vow to the fallen, whispering that this time he would hunt them all down. While observing the interfaces appearing before him, Burze sank into deep contemplation, thinking that he had already given Granada 3 warnings. Narrowing his eyes, he mentally emphasized that the first warning had been to beware of the snow. At the same time, across the vast snowy plain, the voices of many people rang out as they reacted in shock, remarking that those Thrall orcs had actually triggered an avalanche, that they had never expected such a thing to happen, and that a significant number of people appeared to have been swept far away. They anxiously admitted that they could not confirm the exact headcount and cursed the situation in frustration. Hillen hurriedly issued an order, declaring that they would set up camp there and begin searching for the heroes who had been carried away by the avalanche. Soon after, Crew appeared with his subordinates, and Berze's inner voice continued to echo in his mind as he recalled his second warning, that Granada must never let his guard down at night. Upon witnessing the scene unfolding before them, the group erupted into panicked cries, shouting that frost giants and ghouls had appeared, that the Thrall orcs had driven the monsters toward them, and cursing the Thrall orcs once again for causing this disaster. They urgently called for all forces to prepare for combat. A stream of blue energy wrapped around Granada's hand as he grimaced and silently cursed the Demon King repeatedly, his resentment boiling over. The atmosphere descended into utter chaos as screams rang out one after another, with people desperately shouting for others to dodge, flee, and escape, while cries of pain echoed through the battlefield. Watching this carnage unfold through the interface, Burze let out a sly smile as he thought to himself that there was an avalanche by day and monster hordes by night, repeating the sequence in his mind and concluding that before long, the outcome would inevitably become clear. At this moment, Hillen stood gasping for breath. 3 days after entering the Regressed mountain range, the hero expedition, whose personnel had dwindled from 511 to 256, finally reached the summit. Staring at the scenery before him, Hillen was overcome with existential doubt, questioning why it was not there and why the Demon King's tower was nowhere to be found. His voice echoed across the mountaintop as his disbelief turned into fury, and he angrily demanded to know why the tower was not located in a place that heroes could easily find, insisting that this was basic common sense and raging at the absurdity of its absence. Seeing this, Burze thought grimly to himself that their formation was breaking apart. At that moment, someone stepped forward and declared that they were surrendering. Hillen froze upon hearing it, then turned his head in shock and asked what that meant. The man, flustered, explained that the expedition had failed, apologizing and stating that their lives mattered more. The people behind him lowered their heads in silent agreement. Hillen clenched his teeth stubbornly. 6 days after entering the Regressed mountain range, the remaining personnel had dropped from 256 to 52. As they gazed at the distant scene, the group cried out in anger upon realizing that it was the Demon King's tower, cursing the fact that it had been hidden inside a basin. When the door was pushed open, several people shouted bitterly that the first floor only contained weaklings and urged everyone to rush in and wipe them out. At the same time, Burzie's sinister expression twisted with excitement as he recalled his third warning in his mind, that when the door opened, one should never stand near it. Thousands of cannons suddenly glimmered with blue light. Hillen stared in disbelief, wondering what was happening. Instantly, a massive surge of energy was fired, obliterating everything in its path. Burzie's consciousness echoed again, noting that with the dwarven mana cannons, he could handle them all in a single shot. In that moment, the personnel count fell from 52 to 1. Amused, Burzie remarked that it was as expected and that such an attack was still not enough to bring Hillen Cargill down. On the opposite side, Hillen staggered forward, leaning on his sword, and muttered in shock, unable to comprehend what he was seeing. Enraged, he accused the Demon King, shouting that nothing was going according to plan and demanding to know what kind of being he truly was. Suddenly, Granada appeared and called out to him. Hillen, startled, asked with concern whether Granada was all right. Granada replied calmly that he had somehow managed to dodge the attack. Relieved, Hillen stated that they should hurry to the next floor. Granada questioned whether it would really be just the two of them. Hillen infused mana into his sword and declared with firm conviction that he was the hero who had slain the Demon King of Lust and absorbed his power, asserting that a newly descended Demon King stood no chance against him and that having Granada by his side was more than enough. Encouraged by this, Granada agreed cheerfully to go together. Upon arriving, they found that the second floor of the Demon King's tower was completely empty. They continued upward, only to discover that the third floor was also empty. Irritated, Hillen remarked that the tower should have been overflowing with monsters, yet there was nothing, noting how strange the tower was and that nothing appearing next would be surprising anymore. Granada silently reasoned that if both the second and third floors were entirely empty, then something was clearly amiss. They climbed further and reached what was labeled as Burzie's Tower, 4th floor. Below a towering cliff stretched a lush green forest with petals and butterflies drifting quietly under gentle sunlight. Hillen stared blankly and murmured in confusion, questioning what this place was. Scanning the surroundings warily, he commented that after empty second and third floors, finding a forest on the fourth made him doubt whether they were truly inside the Demon King's tower. Granada quietly agreed, sighing that he had been thinking the same thing. Suddenly, a voice praised them for making it this far. Hillen spun around in alarm. A woman dressed in black introduced herself grandly as one of the 4 heavenly kings who protected the Demon King. Adjusting her glasses with excitement, she declared that this dark elementalist would be their opponent. Shocked by the flamboyant introduction, both of them stood frozen. Granada recoiled inwardly in fear, wondering who on earth she was and thinking that they should retreat quietly for now. Hillen, wide-eyed, asked in disbelief whether she was Princess Ernan, and questioned why she looked like that. Flustered, she corrected him, insisting that she was not a princess, but a dark elementalist, and urged them to taste the power of darkness. As she gathered the elements and formed a massive sphere, Hillen muttered in astonishment that such high-level spirit magic was something only Princess Ernan could use, and that it was impossible for someone under mind control to wield it. Recalling everything they had experienced, the Thrall orcs, the avalanche, the night raids, the tower hidden in a basin, the mana cannons on the first floor, the empty second and third floors, and even a crazed princess, Hillen let out a hollow laugh, admitting that he no longer understood anything. He then roared in madness, declaring that he knew nothing anymore and that if a princess would attack the hero who came to save her, then so be it, he would destroy everything. At that moment, Burzie appeared behind him and mocked him for thinking he could do it alone. He struck Hillen, shattering the ground with the impact. Purple energy surged forth as Burzie remarked excitedly that Hillen Cargill was finally showing his face. Kneeling with his sword raised defensively, Hillen sneered back, accusing the Demon King of cowardice for attacking from behind. Internally, he calculated that he would need more power and thought of Granada. Spotting him in the distance, Hillen felt a surge of relief and rushed over, grabbing Granada by the shoulder and proposing that they combine their strength. Granada, confused, asked how that would work, but immediately felt his energy draining away and realized in shock that his power was being siphoned. He soon collapsed, completely exhausted. Hillen spoke arrogantly, reminding him that he had said there would be no problem as long as Granada stayed by his side. Burzy murmured upon seeing it that the artifact must be something significant. Hillen continued proudly, explaining that it was a forbidden artifact called the Elf Eater, which converted an elf's infinite life force into mana. He admitted that the flaw was that once activated, the target would die shortly afterward, but insisted that it was acceptable. Stepping on Granada's head, he asked whether he was fine with that, claiming it was for the greater good. Weakly, Granada cursed him as a scammer and a hypocrite. Burzy laughed coldly, stating that he liked how despicable and lowly Hillen was. He then wondered aloud whether removing that ring would make Hillen weak again. Hillen, confused, asked what he meant, then challenged him madly, taunting him to try and claiming that even the Demon King of Lust had failed to take the ring. Burzy immediately called Gordon's name. In the next instant, Hillen's hand was severed and sent flying. Staring in shock, Hillen froze before screaming in agony, unable to comprehend how it had happened when he had sensed no presence at all. Gordon appeared and coldly judged that humans were rude and loud. Hillen hastily leapt back, retreating to keep his distance, thinking angrily that he had even used the artifact yet was beaten by a mere high-ranking demon, and questioning whether Gordon was flying. Suddenly, a hand gripped Hillen's shoulder. Burzy mocked him, asking where he thought he was going. Hillen stiffened and glanced back in panic, thinking that he had to dodge. However, overwhelmed by Burzy's crushing presence, he realized helplessly that he could not avoid the attack. As Burzy condensed a sphere of energy, Hillen, shaken to his core, wondered just what kind of demon king he was facing. With murderous intent, Burzy told Hillen Cargill to take the hit first. Hearing his name, Hillen's eyes widened in absolute terror. In the next moment, the attack was unleashed, its roar shaking the entire tower and echoing endlessly through the sky. As the smoke and dust gradually dissipated, Burzy stood silently, gazing at Hillen lying sprawled on the ground. He let out a dispirited sigh, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over him. Seeing Hillen lying there helplessly, his mouth agape as he groaned weakly, Burzy remarked with a note of genuine admiration that it was impressive that Hillen was still alive. He then calmly issued his orders, instructing his subordinates to bind Hillen's hands and throw him into prison, and to lock up the other humans who had collapsed outside the door as well. Gordon responded in a serious tone that he understood and would carry out the command. On the other side, Granada murmured weakly that he could see the afterlife. Burzy supported Granada's head and cast a spell, praising him for his good work and saying that this was his reward. Shortly afterward, Granada's vitality returned in full. Staring at his own body in shock, he exclaimed that he had completely recovered. He then turned his head in disbelief, wondering what had happened and whether Burzy had used that precious spirit blossom on him. Not far away, Burzy casually extended his hand and stated that he would give spirit blossom to Hernan as well. Overjoyed, Hernan raised both hands to receive it and thanked him enthusiastically. Looking up at the interface screen, Burzy praised the dwarf as well, saying that he had worked hard and granting him permission to dismantle the tower. Upon hearing this, Roger burst into excited cheers, repeatedly thanking the Demon King and celebrating loudly. Burzy then spoke gently, saying that this was all and instructing everyone to restore and maintain the floor they had been assigned to. With that, he turned around and left. Watching Burzy's retreating figure, Granada voiced his admiration, remarking that even after such a fierce battle, Burzy still looked completely fine, which was only to be expected of a demon king. Hearing this, Hernan stroked his chin and fell silent in thought for a moment. Noticing this, Granada asked what was wrong, addressing her as princess. She replied that it was nothing, adding after a pause that she simply thought the demon king was tired. Elsewhere, Burzy supported himself with one hand as he collapsed to the ground. Lying flat on his back, he panted heavily and complained inwardly about how close it had been, reminding himself that a demon king could not afford to show weakness. He cursed angrily, thinking bitterly about that human, Hillen Cargill, and reflecting that this must be what it meant to be one of the 10 stars. Memories began to surface in his mind as he recalled that the 10 stars were the 10 strongest heroes on the continent, and that although Hillen Cargill was among them, he was one of the weaker ones. Burzy wearily reflected that, to be honest, he had barely used any demonic energy points to strengthen himself in this life, partly because he did not have much to begin with. He admitted that if Hillen Cargill had been in perfect condition, he never would have won. His plan, however, had exhausted Hillen, provoked him, and driven him into panic. Because of everything that had happened, Hillen's field of vision had narrowed, leaving an opening, and as a result, Burzy's all-out strike had landed successfully. Feeling proud, Burzy thought that for now he had achieved a perfect victory without meeting the Demon King's usual standards, something that had never happened in the past. He believed that he had successfully altered fate. With that realization, he quickly sat up, his eyes filled with determination as he told himself that he could do it, and that he could change the future. Images of people from the past surfaced in his mind as he swore to himself that he would get revenge on those damned heroes, laughing excitedly as he did so. At that moment, in front of a tower elsewhere, voices filled with dissatisfaction rang out as people angrily questioned what kind of nonsense this was, shouting that it was unbelievable to claim the heroes had given up simply because they could not find the tower. Meanwhile, at the Holton Walk press conference hall, reporters holding cameras pressed forward relentlessly, demanding accountability on behalf of investors and asking who was responsible for this failure. A knight, drenched in cold sweat, hurriedly argued back that they had not failed yet, insisting that there was still hope. He stressed that Sir Hillen Cargill and the great heroes had not given up and were still searching for the Demon King's tower, pleading with them to grant just a little more time. High in the sky, flocks of pigeons spread their wings and flew in every direction, carrying with them news that the emergence of a new Demon King was rapidly spreading across the entire continent. Upon reading the newspaper, the Emperor erupted in fury, cursing Hillen Cargill and raging that the man had spoken arrogantly, yet now achieved nothing. He declared that if Hillen failed to rescue the princess, he would be executed without mercy. At a mining site, an informant hesitantly tried to bring up news regarding the hero's journey, but Louise cut him off impatiently, stating that she did not care about any of that and ordering him to focus solely on finding Loger. Elsewhere, people whispered anxiously among themselves, saying that Sir Hillen Cargill had never returned, that some believed he was already dead, and that the entire story had been twisted and exaggerated. As sorrow spread across the world, Berger's demonic energy accumulated at an alarming rate, soaring rapidly until it reached 290,000 points. At the Heroes Guild headquarters, a doubtful voice questioned whether there was even the slightest falsehood in what hero Wharton had claimed. Wharton firmly insisted that he swore on his name that everything he had said was nothing but the truth. Another individual, deep in thought, remarked that the situation was therefore extremely serious, but emphasized that since the identity of the new Demon King remained unknown, caution was necessary. In a low, grave tone, it was stated that Hillen Cargill was one of the 10 stars and could not be defeated easily. They decided to wait 10 more days for news of him, and if there was still no information after that period, all 4,728 heroes across the continent would launch a full-scale assault to eradicate the new Demon King. Deep within Berger's Tower underground prison, Berger walked calmly through the corridor. Stopping outside a cell, he observed quietly and remarked that Hillen was awake, noting with interest that even his recovery speed was exceptional. Hillen responded coldly, stating that if the Demon King had kept him alive, then he must want something from him, and demanded that he stop beating around the bush and get straight to the point. Berger curled his lips into a mocking smile and replied that he was pleased to see Hillen willing to talk, then directly proposed that Hillen become his vassal. Hillen froze in shock and questioned whether he had heard that correctly, admitting that he had never expected such a proposal. Berger then threw a bag of gold in front of him, tempting him by pointing out that the hero's journey must have cost an enormous amount of money. Expenses such as feeding hundreds of people, security costs, lodging, membership fees, armor, weapons, and even top-grade consumables. He slowly explained that such costs were usually covered by investments from merchant groups and nobles. If the Demon King was defeated, the heroes' lives would be transformed, but if they failed, they would be buried under crushing debt, which was the inevitable fate of heroes who accepted investments. With a sinister grin, Burrs added that this time, all investments had been concentrated on a single individual, the captain of the hero party, Hillen Cargill himself. Upon realizing this, Hillen was struck by overwhelming terror. He hesitated inwardly, thinking that even if he managed to escape from this place, he would be branded a failed hero and forced to live the rest of his life in hiding, endlessly hunted down by debt. Hillen glanced upward and questioned how Burzy knew that. Granada suddenly appeared and interjected that he had been the one who told him. Enraged, Hillen shouted Granada's name and accused him of betraying them. Granada, his veins bulging as he opened his mouth wide, angrily retorted that Hillen had the nerve to say that after what he had done to him, calling him a scammer, and declared that he had been on their side from the very beginning. Burzy then stepped in casually and stated that the reason Hillen had failed was because there had never been a Demon King like him until now. He added that just as he had broken the traditional standards of Demon Kings, Hillen and the others would soon adapt and find a way to clear the towers. However, as he summoned Larmani's Orbi, he slyly remarked that if one of the strongest heroes were to secretly interfere with those plans, he questioned whether the humans could truly succeed. Hillen cautiously asked what the object was. Burzy explained that it was a magical tool used to monitor his subordinates, stating that once it entered the body, it would cling to the brain instantly. He further explained that he would immediately know if Hillen harbored hostility toward him, and that he could destroy Hillen's brain with a single gesture, adding offhandedly that the item had been quite expensive. With a sinister smile, Burzy added that if the orb failed to adapt to Hillen's body, he would consider that a rejection and kill him, noting that there were plenty of other usable heroes anyway. Nearby, several people lay battered on the ground. Hillen raised his voice and urgently told them to wait, insisting that a hero as strong as himself was immune to mind control magic, and claiming that the moment the orb entered his body, it would disappear, stressing that it would not be his fault. Granada curled his lips into a cunning smile and stated that a hero could dispel their own mental defenses by sheer will. Burzy coldly followed up by telling Hillen that he had heard him. Furious, Hillen pointed at Granada and hurled insults at him, calling him a deranged elf and demanding to know whether he felt any shame. Hillen shouted that Granada was the one who should be ashamed and accused him of wasting a precious magical tool, swearing that he would never submit to a demon king. Before he could finish, Burzy reached out and forcefully clamped Hillen's jaw shut, brutally ordering him to shut up and swallow. Hillen's eyes bulged for a moment before he closed them and lost consciousness. Granada narrowed his eyes and remarked that Hillen was truly tenacious, asking what Burzy would do if Hillen preferred death. Burzy calmly told him not to worry. Hillen's body then began to emit dark energy, transforming him into Hillen Cargill, equipped with Armani's gear and bearing the status of the Demon King's vassal. Burzy continued, stating that a greedy human who treated his comrades as disposable tools for money would never sacrifice himself. As if sensing this, Hillen cursed inwardly in bitterness. Several hours later, in a room softly illuminated by sunlight filtering through a window, Gordon reported that although Burzy had made Hillen Cargill his vassal, the massive debt of 100,000 gold would heavily restrict Hillen's activities. Thinking about the 2 bags of gold, Gordon added that the gold coins Burzy had previously exchanged for demonic energy points amounted to only about 2,000 gold, a sum comparable to a small nation's annual budget, and asked how Burzy planned to gather more. Burzy smiled faintly and said that it was about time he received a message. Gordon, taken aback, asked for clarification. Burzy calmly replied that he was referring to the gathering of demon kings held once a year, known as the Unison of Towers. Recalling his past, Burzy thought to himself that in his previous life he had never attended because he had found the idea of demon kings banding together disgusting. He then let out a scheming laugh and remarked that the other demon kings had survived in Arrain for a long time and must have accumulated vast amounts of gold and treasure. In his mind, Gordon screamed in alarm, wondering whether the demon king was planning to exchange demonic energy points for money again. However, upon seeing a new message appear on the interface, Gordon thought to himself that this was what he would have said in the past, but after dealing directly with the heroes, he now understood. He realized that if they had followed the old Demon King standards, they would never have been able to stop the heroes, and that he had no choice but to admit this. Gordon then turned back and announced that an invitation to the Unison of Towers had arrived. Hearing this, Burzy curled his lips into a slight smile and confidently declared that they were going, stating that he intended to swindle his senior Demon Kings. Behind him, Gordon placed a hand over his chest and resolved inwardly that he could believe in him. At the Tower of Lies, a black spire standing ominously in the middle of a tranquil lake, on the 13th floor within the Demon King's chamber, Burzy slowly stepped forward in the midst of the grand hall. He remarked with calm confidence that although he was not late, everyone had already arrived. Sliding a hand into his pocket, he coldly wondered whether they had many matters to discuss without him. At that moment, his identity was revealed as Burje Deas, the Demon King of Flames, a demonic dragon. Seeing this, Draxon Doldov, the Demon King of Beasts of the werewolf race, growled his name with barely concealed hostility. Beside him, Reyna Soldine, the Demon King of Winters and a frost demon, commented indifferently that Burzy was indeed the one everyone had been talking about. Shortly after, Ugar Belve, the Demon King of Indestructibility of the Titan race, quietly judged that the arrogant individual who had insulted established standards had finally arrived. Meanwhile, Jason Kochmund, the Demon King of Lies, whose race remained unknown, enthusiastically welcomed Burzy. Burzy responded with open contempt, calling them fools and questioning whether Demon Kings should truly feel no shame in forming an alliance. Internally, however, he acknowledged that this alliance was clearly the correct decision regarding Arrain's situation, even if certain reservations lingered in his mind. Ugar immediately erupted in rage, shouting that Burzy was the real fool and demanding to know who a newcomer thought he was to interfere in their affairs, angrily questioning what Burzy could possibly know about Arrain. Sensing the intense killing intent behind Ugar's outburst, Burzy reflected that such simple provocation made it easy to read one's true intentions, realizing that Ugar was plainly trying to kill him. Stepping closer, Burzy warned him sharply, asking whether Ugar truly dared to call him a fool and declaring that he alone was the only elite present. Ugar glared back and retorted that if Burzy wished for death, he would gladly grant it. Burzy merely laughed in response and invited him to try. At that moment, Jason raised both hands, releasing a surge of energy that instantly cut off the confrontation between Ugar and Burzy. With a friendly gesture, Jason addressed them both, explaining that the purpose of this gathering was cooperation and urging them not to waste such precious time. Observing this, Burzy grew deeply contemplative, noting to himself that Jason had erased the killing intent of two demon kings in an instant and realizing that what he had witnessed was not magic. He questioned whether this power belonged to Jason himself or to the tower, briefly considering whether it resembled Mana's phantom, before cautioning himself against drawing conclusions without evidence and resolving to remain vigilant. After gathering his thoughts, Burzy walked forward, pulled out a chair, and agreed to proceed. Jason cheerfully expressed his gratitude for Burzy's understanding, then warmly announced that the meeting would now begin and encouraged everyone to freely voice their opinions. Burzy responded indifferently, remarking that the meeting seemed far from anything grand. Draxon then pointed at the table and stated seriously that if no one else wished to speak, he would begin. Fixing his gaze on Burzy with a feral grin full of killing intent, he demanded to know where Hilen Cargill was. Hearing this, Burzy's expression darkened slightly, and he hesitated as if about to explain who Hilen Cargill was. On the other side, the aide of the Demon King of Lies questioned what had happened to Hilen Cargill and whether he was already dead, while the aide of the Demon King of Beasts also listened with visible curiosity. Gordon covered his mouth and answered hesitantly that he was not sure, explaining that Hilen Cargill had not even entered their tower and was most likely wandering somewhere in the Urgest Mountains, adding awkwardly that they should not press him for more information. Inside the reception room of the Tower of Lies aides, the aide of the Demon King of Indestructibility crossed his arms and challenged Gordon, insisting that such a claim was ridiculous and that Hilen Cargill should have been able to spot the tower from afar. Gordon, clearly flustered, could only reply that this was not the case for their tower. The aide of the Demon King of Lies then asked curiously whether the rumors were true and whether Gordon's Demon King really was what people claimed. As the four aides continued to bombard him with questions, Gordon thought to himself that this situation was exactly as the Demon King had predicted. He recalled Burzy calmly instructing him earlier that if the other aides asked about Hilen Cargill, he was to say that he knew nothing, emphasizing that they intended to use Hilen Cargill as a spy and that secrecy was of the utmost importance. Returning to the present, Gordon silently reflected that, even so, something felt strange, and that now he understood the Demon King had not been wrong. He then lowered his voice and admitted that the Demon King he served truly was as rumored. Immediately afterward, Gordon erupted in rage, shouting internally that his damned Demon King was an arrogant brat who never listened to anyone, that the moment Gordon looked away, he would get himself into trouble, and that Gordon could not understand why the Demon King did not simply handle everything on his own. Holding that posture, Gordon felt a strange sense of satisfaction, wondering why venting those thoughts made him feel so fulfilled. Hearing this outburst, the others began speaking one after another, expressing that they understood him completely and lamenting how all demon kings seemed to be strange in their own ways, each beginning to complain about their own masters. Seeing this, Gordon felt deeply moved and realized that he had needed emotional support more than he had expected. Elsewhere, Ugar spoke suspiciously, questioning whether Burzy truly expected him to believe such a story. Burzy responded firmly that it was the truth. Enraged, Ugar demanded to know whether Burzy was seriously claiming that Hilen Cargill never reached the tower simply because it was not built at the mountain's peak, accusing him of mocking everyone. Burzy replied indifferently that he was free to construct his tower wherever he wished. Jason then spoke in a calm and measured tone, pointing out that heroes were still targeting Burzy's tower and questioning why Burzy had left it undefended to come here. He followed this with a sinister smile, remarking that Burzy surely had learned at the academy that a demon king who lost their tower would meet a dreadful end, especially considering that Burzy Dias had been top of his class. Burzy rested his chin on his hand and replied coolly that Jason need not concern himself with the tower, stating that he was protecting it in his own way. He then frowned irritably, thinking that the Demon King of Lies was truly infuriating. Seeing this reaction, Jason laughed lightly and attempted to smooth things over, saying that if that was Burzy's stance, then very well, and that he would not pry any further. Draxon then spoke coldly, demanding to know whether Burzy thought Archduke Arcane would allow such behavior. Burzy replied with clear disdain, asking who cared about what that old geezer thought. Shocked, Draxon exclaimed in disbelief, while Burzy turned the question back on him, asking calmly whether something was wrong. Draxon. Draxon spoke with a sense of resignation, saying that it did not matter anymore and that they should simply move on. As Burzy lifted his gaze toward the chandelier hanging from the ceiling, he silently reasoned to himself that even if he lied, there would be no way for them to verify it. He concluded that, even if it made them suspicious of him, it was still better than being exposed. Steeling his resolve, he reminded himself that he would not forget the reason he had come there, and that his objective was to earn 100,000 gold. Instead of eagerly participating in the discussion, the Demon Kings continued their conversation among themselves. Observing them, Burzy quietly reflected that even among the Demon Kings, there was a clear hierarchy, and that the Demon King of Lies undoubtedly ranked quite high. In this way, he continued listening carefully in order to gather information and determine which Demon Kings were lacking demonic energy. At that moment, Reina cast a glance back at him. Burzy widened his eyes in confusion, and later, on the balcony of the 13th floor of the Tower of Lies, he stepped out and cautiously asked what was going on. Reina calmly replied that there was nothing to hide, explaining that ever since she had heard about him, she had wanted to speak with him alone. Burzy hesitantly asked if she meant him, to which Reina immediately confirmed that she did. Turning her head back with a serious expression, she stated that she agreed with some of his points. Burzy froze in shock and asked if she was serious, while inwardly wondering whether Reina had said similar things in his previous life as well. Reina then clarified in a composed manner that he should not misunderstand her, as she did not hate standards like he did. In fact, she explained that she lived by those standards. However, she went on to analyze that she believed Demon Kings needed to be more flexible, especially in Overrun, and that this was precisely why she had wanted to meet him. She reasoned that speaking with him alone would be far more productive than trying to argue with those fools. Burzy gave a faint scoff and asked what she thought of him, and Reina replied indifferently that he was not bad and that he looked better than she had expected. Burzy awkwardly thanked her, then faltered in confusion at his own reaction. Reina then produced a small sphere and added that it was a personal transmitter, telling him that he could call her any time if he wanted advice. She remarked that as long as he did not insult the Demon King's standards in front of her, she would play along, adding that she had finally found someone she could talk to and hoping that he would not disappear too quickly. Burzy then asked about the Demon King of Lies, and Reina admitted helplessly that she could not read him at all, though she acknowledged that he was still better than those two fools. As he watched her cold figure disappear into the distance, Burzy frowned and thought to himself that Reina Soldine was someone he could not fully trust yet, but also an unexpected gain. Back atop the snowy mountain, at Burzi's tower, on the first floor, Ernan approached cheerfully while holding a plate of cookies and excitedly told Roger to try the cookies she had baked. Roger, startled, lifted his glasses in disbelief and asked how she had managed to make cookies in the tower. Ernan proudly explained that the Demon King had bought her the ingredients, so she had tried baking with the help of elementals. Roger remarked with admiration that being a genius elementalist must be very convenient. Ernan's eyes sparkled as she urged him to go on and try them. Roger accepted a cookie with gratitude and thanked her. In his mind, Roger excitedly thought that a princess who had never worked a day in her life had just made cookies for him, and resolved that no matter how bad they tasted, he would say they were delicious. With that determination, he took a decisive bite. Immediately afterward, Roger's eyes widened in shock as he realized that the taste was beyond belief, so phenomenal that it stirred his mana. He marveled internally that he had never experienced anything like it before, and that this must be what heaven felt like, as his spirit seemed to float upward. Ernan confidently asked how it was, and Roger replied blissfully that he could not escape from it, wondering aloud what on earth she had created. She smugly explained that she had added spirit blossoms to the dough, and expressed her happiness that he liked it, proudly declaring that this was to be expected of her cookies. Roger, hearing this, exclaimed in shock and asked why she would give him something so precious, finally understanding why he had been filled with mana. Ernan laughed warmly and said that it was a gift so they could remain close in the future, adding that they would be seeing each other for a long time. Roger hesitated, agreeing that it was true but still feeling conflicted. Ernan then asked curiously whether he thought Granada would enjoy them as well, and Roger replied firmly that she would enjoy them even more than he did. Delighted, Ernan cheered happily, then asked whether the Demon King would enjoy them too. Roger, hearing that, reacted with confusion. Elsewhere, Burzy returned and asked whether everyone had already left. Jason replied in a friendly manner that they had finished talking and that it had been short, then offered him some tea if he wished to talk more. Burzy questioned whether he meant the two of them alone, and Jason answered with a bright smile that he did. Jason then interlaced his fingers and, lowering his voice ominously, stated that he knew Burzy was in need of human money. Hearing this, a flash of surprise crossed Burzy's eyes. He narrowed his gaze cautiously and asked what Jason meant by that, while inwardly panicking and wondering where the information had leaked.